Hey, everyone! If you enjoy my quantum audiobooks, you can support me by becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me keep creating, and you'll get exclusive perks. You can also access my audiobooks directly through Google Drive. Check out the link in the description. Now, let's get started.
In front of an elite private academy in Manhattan, a luxurious black off-road vehicle stood parked by the roadside. Leaning casually against the car was an unbelievably handsome young man, lazily scrolling through his phone while waiting for someone. Every girl passing through the school gate couldn't help secretly glancing at him, hoping he might notice them. But from beginning to end, the young man remained completely indifferent. Only after hearing a cheerful voice call out, "Brother Yi Yu," did he finally look up. A beautiful silver-haired girl ran toward him with sparkling eyes before throwing herself directly into his arms. "Brother Yi Yu." Wanda hugged him tightly before raising her head with a sweet smile. "You're actually free today. You even came to pick me and Pietro up from school." Before Yi Yu could answer, an annoyed voice came from behind her. "I'm the older brother, not the younger ones." Pietro walked over with a bruised face and swollen nose, yet his expression was still unbelievably proud. Wanda immediately turned around and made a face at him. "HMPH. I'm still your sister." Looking at the bickering siblings, Yi Yu laughed softly. "All right, both of you get in the car first." After the car started moving, Yi Yu glanced at Pietro through the mirror. "So who did you fight today?" "I won, obviously." Pietro proudly raised his fist despite the injuries on his face. "That idiot Gary actually tried to chase Wanda. I beat him up already. Next time he sees me, he'll run." "My brother was amazing today." Wanda immediately joined in proudly from the passenger seat. Pietro knocked all three of them to the ground by himself. Then she crossed her arms with a smug expression. "And honestly, someone like Gary still dares to pursue me. He should at least look in the mirror first." As she spoke, Wanda secretly glanced at Yi Yu's almost perfect side profile while he drove. A small smile quietly appeared on her lips. "I'm already 15 this year, and brother Yi Yu is 19, so when I turn 18. The more she thought about it, the happier she became. Meanwhile, Yi Yu stretched a fist toward the back seat. "Well done. If another guy bothers Wanda again, beat him harder next time. If the school or parents cause trouble, call me." Pietro immediately bumped fists with him proudly. "Of course." Seeing the two people she cared about most standing on her side like this, Wanda suddenly felt warmth filling her heart. For a moment, all the painful memories from their years of wandering no longer seemed important. Just then the phone inside the car suddenly rang. Yi Yu glanced at the caller ID and sighed helplessly. "Tony Stark." After answering, Tony's loud voice immediately came through the speakers. "Buddy, your newspaper is seriously unfair to me." "You mean the Daily Bugle?" Yi Yu asked casually. "Exactly," Tony complained while apparently eating something. "Can't your newspaper write more positive articles about the great Tony Stark?" Yi Yu chuckled. "Do you even have positive news?" "Hey, of course I do." Tony immediately sounded offended. "I'm a billionaire genius inventor who donates to charity. People deserve to know how amazing I am." "But people prefer gossip." Yi Yu smirked while driving. "Compared to your genius inventor image, readers are way more interested in your scandals with models." "Unbelievable." Tony sighed dramatically. "You're sacrificing my reputation for newspaper sales." "You care about reputation." Yi Yu interrupted him directly. "Come on, tell me what you actually want." Tony immediately laughed awkwardly. All right, I just wanted to ask, when are you releasing the second book of the Great Detective series?" "I've been waiting forever." "You already asked 3 times this month." Yi Yu shook his head helplessly. "I'm busy writing the third Harry Potter novel right now." The moment Tony heard that, he instantly protested. "What's so good about that wizard kid? Men should read detective stories." Before Yi Yu could reply, Wanda suddenly spoke up from the passenger seat. "No, I want brother Yi Yu to finish Harry Potter first." Tony instantly fell silent. Ever since learning the truth about Stark Industries' weapons, Wanda had never been friendly toward him. And Tony honestly didn't dare argue with her. After a few seconds, his tone immediately became much gentler. Our little angel Wanda is here too. I recently developed an AI learning assistant for you. Trust me, it'll definitely help with your studies." For both Wanda and Pietro, Tony Stark has always had a little bit of guilt. Although the death of their parents had nothing to do with them, even the weapons of Stark Industries were sold through other channels by some interested people. Although he didn't find it, Tony Stark has been tracking it down. It's just that every time a clue is found, it will be cut off. So much so that Tony Stark suspected that the insider was inside Stark Industries. However, even if this matter is not directly related to me, when I think about it, Wanda and Pietro lost their parents because of their indirect creation of weapons, and they wandered around when they were only 10 years old. Tony felt a little guilty. Although he always acted very free and easy, giving people a feeling of being out of tune, in fact, this guy was very soft inside. He didn't dare to imagine how much suffering the siblings had suffered in the past few years, so even though it didn't have much to do with him, he always wanted to make up for them. Fortunately, Yu picked up this pair of siblings when they were wandering, otherwise, Tony would definitely feel even more guilty. It would be great if that guy Yu could finish the whole detective series. Just about to say something, Yu, who was waiting for the traffic lights, suddenly frowned, then looked up through the car window at the roof of the 7-story building not far away, and then a dark red flashed in his eyes of light. On the roof of a building not far away, the guy who was lying on the roof and aiming at Yu's vehicle with a sniper scope suddenly had a confused look in his eyes. Then the whole person stumbled to his feet, and his whole body stepped forward uncontrollably. Subsequently, with a bang, the whole person fell directly from the roof. Ah. My God. Oh my God. Get an ambulance. Hearing screams coming from the street not far away, Tony Stark, who was about to say something on the other end of the phone, suddenly frowned. What happened? Need help? It's okay, it's just a little thing. Yu shook his head and smiled. I'll make a phone call first. Okay, no problem, but if you need anything, just call me anytime. You know the energy that Stark Industries has. Thanks, buddy. After thanking him, Yu hung up the phone directly. Did something happen over there? Wanda sat on the co-pilot, stood up, and looked up the street not far away. It's okay, it's just a little thing. Yu rubbed Wanda's head with a smile, and then dialed a number directly. Soon, a dignified voice came from the other end of the phone. Who are you? Mr. Wilson, I am Yu. On the other end of the phone, a guy with a very strong figure and a chilling feeling was holding the phone. After hearing Yu's self-reporting, the aura of his whole body dissipated instantly. So it's Mr. Yi, what's Mr. Yi's request? Something. Manhattan Street, Xilixiang Street, there is an unlucky guy who fell from the roof today. I don't know who this guy is. Please ask Mr. Wilson to check for me. Definitely also help me to ask the people behind him say hello. No problems. The middle-aged man with a strong figure nodded and smiled. Mr. Yi saved my son's life, and I owe Mr. Yi a favor, so if Mr. Yi has something to do, I Jin Bing will naturally help. Please rest assured, all right, Mr. Yi, I promise to help you solve this matter. Thanks. Yu hung up the phone, then smiled and said to Pietro in the back seat. So sometimes, some troubles can be solved with just one phone call. This is the network, Pietro, who wants to protect Wanda. If so, you need to build your own support. Hearing Yu's words, Pietro nodded lightly and then began to think thoughtfully. As the car started, after a while, Pietro raised his head, smiled at Yu and said, Today I beat up Gary who wanted to pursue Wanda and the three of them, so many guys in the school admire me very much. They want me to be their boss. I always think these guys are too immature, but Brother Yi, it seems that I can also gather them together. In this case, I don't have to do it myself in the future. In this way, the trouble is not mine anymore. Clever. Yu snapped his fingers, then rubbed Wanda's little head and said, Be good at school, I heard that your schoolwork is very bad. Woo. Hearing Yu's words, Wanda pursed her lips and said with an aggrieved face, I don't like mathematics. I still can't figure out why mathematics is so difficult. In the Manhattan Villa area, in a luxurious villa. Seeing that Wanda and Pietro were busy with their homework, Yu came to the training room in the basement alone. Boom! The sound of punching sandbags kept ringing in the training room. Half an hour later, under a heavy blow, the sandbag flew more than 10 meters away. Untying the white bandages wrapped around his hands, Yuking wiped the sweat on his forehead, and then said to the empty air in front of him, Open the system panel. Following Yu's order, the system panel appeared in front of Yu. Host, Yu. Age 19 years old. Identity, Helm of the Horn newspaper, head of the Horn publishing house. Abilities, mental power level 7, psychokinesis. Level 5, physical fitness 4 times the peak of a normal person's body. Fire ability, medium level. Self-healing ability, regeneration of severed limbs, medium level. Current task, none. Trigger special mission, none. Looking at the last 2 tasks on the system, Yu still shook his head slightly. It has been 5 years since I traveled to this world. From the very beginning when triggering missions easily until now, it has become very difficult to trigger some special missions. From the establishment of the Bugle newspaper to the recruitment of Matthew as a lawyer for the newspaper and publishing house, and finally the adoption of Wanda's siblings. But now, it is difficult to trigger some tasks, and my life is becoming more and more peaceful. I thought that in the afternoon, the guy who wanted to kill himself with a sniper rifle would trigger some special missions so that I could exercise my muscles. But I never thought that the system did not assign missions to myself at all. The longer the time, the weaker the sense of existence of the system. Is it true that the system will be upgraded again after the curtain of Marvel is opened? Calculating the time, it seems that the curtain of the Marvel world will also be opened. After Tony Stark said those words in front of the TV that countless Marvel fans regarded as the beginning of the Marvel movie universe, the Marvel world will begin. Fortunately, there are no such things as mutants in this world, and I haven't heard of any weird things happening. Otherwise, you really can't tell whether this is the Marvel movie universe or not. But according to Yu's observations, this world is indeed just a pure movie universe. In the evening, at the dinner table, cauliflower contains a lot of vitamins, which are good for growth and development, and can also improve human immunity, so dear Wanda, don't be picky eaters. Seeing Wanda, who was unwilling to eat cauliflower, Yu said with a smile. Upon hearing what Yu said, Wanda seemed to think of something, looked at her body, and then directly ate the cauliflower in front of her. It seemed that eating such a small amount was not enough, so he took a fork and took all the cauliflower from the plate in front of Pietro. Looking at the unreasonable Wanda, Pietro sighed helplessly. He was about to eat the fried egg on the plate, but he never thought that Wanda would hold the fork and put the fried egg directly in his own bowl middle. Please do not. Pietro looked helplessly at the beautiful Wanda, who was eating fried eggs, and then sighed. Sister, I know you want to grow up and get married soon. Before Pietro finished speaking, Wanda suddenly raised her head, and a sharp look passed through her eyes which made Pietro startled. Then he immediately changed his words. What, I still have some green peppers and baby corn, do you want? Don't want. Wanda skillfully removed the baby corn from the plate in front of Pietro, then shook her head and said, I don't like green peppers. After finishing speaking, Pietro didn't care about the helpless face, and then looked at Yu with a sweet smile. Brother Yu, I'm not picky eaters, so I will grow up soon. At that time, I can be with Brother Yu. Definitely, my Wanda is a very well-behaved lady. Seeing the helpless Pietro and Wanda smiling sweetly towards him, Yu raised his hand and fondled Wanda's hair. Feeling the tenderness of Yu's palm, Wanda smiled even sweeter. Only Pietro on the side held a fork and sighed, constantly looking at the green pepper in front of him. Since all the other side dishes are taken away, why not take away the green peppers as well? I don't like green peppers either. Well, hello, wait Wanda, what are you going to do? Seeing that Wanda once again skillfully put the green pepper on his dinner plate while Yu was not paying attention, Pietro immediately felt it. It's a pain in my heart. In other words, with such a younger sister, what can I do? Well, Pietro, who felt a little depressed in life, sighed again, then closed his eyes, rolled up the pasta and green peppers with a fork and ate them with closed eyes. Huh. How bitter. The dinner was very harmonious, only Yu and Wanda thought so. As for Pietro, well, that's pretty good too. But Yu's family is so harmonious, but outside is not peaceful at all. Hell's Kitchen inside a luxurious building. Have you checked it out? Big Wilson, or the guy who should be called Jin Bin, sat on the huge sofa, then looked at the bullseye in front of him and asked, It's been checked. Bullseye nodded lightly and then replied, Boss, the person who wanted to attack Mr. Yi was hired by those guys from the Fire Wolf gang. The reason is that a week ago, Mr. Yi's Bugle News reported that I wrote an article about the business of those people from the Fire Wolf gang. So much so that the people of the Fire Wolf gang lost millions. So that group of people hired that hapless guy to teach Mr. Yi some lessons. Hearing Bullseye's words, Jin Bin took a cigar and smiled disdainfully. These idiots actually offended Mr. Yi, and that's right, they have never seen Mr. Yi's ability. But whether they know Mr. Yi's ability or not, they are not worthy of forgiveness. After all, I once said that Mr. Yi is a distinguished guest of Hell's Kitchen. Anyone who wants to provoke Mr. Yi is against me. After saying that, Jin Bing stood up, walked out of the window, looked at the sparsely lit outside, and then said lightly, Bullseye, you can go there yourself. Go and say hello to them for Mr. Yi and tell the others people. Let them know what the consequences of doing this are. No problems. Bullseye shrugged his shoulders and said with a relaxed face, Anyway, there's nothing to do now. It's good to exercise your muscles and bones. After finishing speaking, he turned and left Jin Bing's room. Soon after Bullseye left, a teenager walked in, looked at Jin Bin in the darkness, turned on the light and asked, Dad, why don't you turn on the light? Hearing his son's voice behind him, Jin Bin, who was originally in the dark, turned around instantly with a kind smile on his face. It's so late, why don't you go to bed? You know I still have class tomorrow. At midnight, Hell's Kitchen Junction. In the quiet night, bursts of gunfire resounded, breaking the original calm. However, none of the residents living here turned on the lights after hearing the sound. It seemed that the people here were used to what kind of battles would happen every midnight. At the gathering place of the Fire Wolf Gang, many people were constantly attacking outside with weapons in their hands. But soon, wailing resounded in the gathering place. In just a few minutes, the color of sparks flickering in the dark night gradually faded, and there was nothing but sporadic wailing and gunshots. In the gathering place, a guy in his 30s was looking at him in horror. He seemed to have a target painted on his forehead. He couldn't help but sit on the ground and backed away, his eyes flashed with fear. "Please don't kill me, Mr. Bullseye. Our Fire Wolf Gang did not offend Mr. Jin Bin, and we have always respected Mr. Jin Bin. We have nothing to offend." While speaking, the middle-aged man in his 30s kept backing away in fear, while in front of him, Bullseye was constantly fiddling with a dagger. "That's right, you really haven't offended our boss, Mr. Jin Bin, but don't you know what you did yourself?" Listening to the playful tone in Bullseye's words, the terrified middle-aged man stepped back constantly and quickly shrank back against the wall. But no matter how he thinks about it, he can't think of when his crimes have been merged. It's really stupid. Looking at the middle-aged man with a frightened face in front of him, Bullseye laughed and raised his weapon at him at the same time. "Listen, Mr. Yi asked me to say hello to you." "Mr. Yi, that Yi? You mean Mr. Yi Yu from Bugle News?" The middle-aged man, who just realized why Bullseye brought people to the door late at night, immediately raised his hand and waved his hands begging for mercy. "Misunderstanding, Mr. Bullseye. All this is a misunderstanding. I have money. I have a lot of money. I am willing to compensate Mr. Yi." "Apologize to Mr. Yi. You are not worthy." As he spoke, before the middle-aged man with a terrified expression finished begging for mercy, he heard a bang, and a bullet directly passed through the head of the middle-aged man on the ground. Perhaps this dead guy is very regretful at the moment, but what does this have to do with Bullseye? Looking at the men who were cleaning up the scene, Bullseye put away his weapon, turned and left the scene. Only the guy who was still terrified before he died was left. The next morning, Yi Yu was about to drive Wanda and Pietro to school when the phone rang. After picking up the phone, I heard Jin Bing's hearty voice from the opposite side. "Mr. Yi, I've already greeted those blind people for you. You can rest assured." "Really? Thanks so much, Mr. Wilson." "You're welcome, just treat it as me paying you back a favor. I hope we can meet again when we have times." "Definitely." Yi Yu hung up the phone with a smile, then looked at the co-pilot Wanda who was listening to the song with her eyes closed, and smiled softly. "Well, it would be better if there wasn't that pretty B*** D looking for the job after sending them off to school. I don't want the Horn newspaper to be entered by people from SHIELD. Hi, boss. Hi, boss. Hi, boss." In the Bugle newspaper office, just after entering the newspaper office, the employees stood up and greeted Yi Yu after seeing Yi Yu coming in. "Do your work first." And Yi Yu pressed his hands down, motioning them to continue working, and walked towards his office at the same time. When passing by the legal department, he suddenly found Matthew wearing glasses sitting there, seeming a little distressed, so Yi Yu knocked on the door and walked in. "Boss, you are here." Although Yi Yu didn't speak, he still clearly knew who the person who entered his office was. "Sometimes I really envy you. You can tell who is coming and going just by hearing." Walking to Matthew, Yi Yu picked up a cigarette and handed it to Matthew. Very rarely, Matthew reached out and took the cigarette and then put it in his mouth. "Boss, if the price of this skill is that you can't see anything, you won't be envious." Matthew shook his head with a wry smile, then lit the cigarette. "I remember you rarely smoke." Leaning on the desk, looking at Matthew's frowning face, he smiled and said, "First of all, I respect that everyone has their own privacy, but as a friend, seeing your frowning face, what happened? If you need help, you can always speak up. You know, although it's not our responsibility to help some poor people file lawsuits, I'm still willing to support you. It's just some money, it doesn't matter." Hearing what Yi Yu said, Matthew smiled softly. "Boss, I know you are a kind-hearted person, and the worst thing is to see the poor being bullied and unfairly treated. Otherwise, I would not choose to give up that law firm. Come to the legal department of the Daily Bugle to work. After all, firstly, I have the money to get it. And secondly, I can also uphold the justice for those ordinary people that should belong to them. In this regard, I should actually say thank you. After all, you are the first person who allows the body of your legal department to take over the lawsuits of ordinary people outside without charging. For this, I am very grateful." Hearing what Matthew said, Yi Yu nodded lightly. "So your troubles are not these. Hearing Yi Yu's voice, with a hint of questioning, Daredevil, oh no, it should be Matthew with a wry smile and shook his head. Well, actually, my girlfriend and I had a fight again. She misunderstood me a bit matter. With that said, Matthew spread his shoulders weakly, expressing that he was also helpless. If it's a misunderstanding, then it's good to just say it. After all, once a thing is misunderstood for a long time, it will really affect the relationship. Seeing Matthew in distress, Yi Yu said with a smile, not that simple. Matthew shook his head and then smiled a little shyly. There are some things there is no way to say them or she will collapse because of it. Then that's your problem, buddy. Yi Yu stood up, patted Matthew on the shoulder and said with a smile, dude, we can't interfere in personal matters. After all, many things need to be faced by the parties themselves. This is called respecting other people's privacy. That's why I don't have a girlfriend, it's too troublesome. Definitely, it may also be because I'm afraid that a little girl will be sad. After all, she's holding her hand and counting how many years before she can become an adult. But what I want to say is, man, if there's anything you need help with, you know it. Yi Yu looked at Matthew and said very seriously, definitely, when needed, I will definitely not be polite. Matthew nodded lightly, then shrugged his shoulders and said, after all, this is the first time I have met someone who is worth billions of dollars at the age of 19. By the way, that woman who smells like an agent has come to your office again. You should find a way to get rid of this woman first. This is already the third time. Matthew pointed in the direction of Yi Yu's office, then smiled at Yi Yu. I don't understand, I'm a small horn newspaper. What's worth the group of guys coming here again and again? Yi Yu rolled his eyes helplessly, then stood up and walked towards his office. Pushing open the door of the office, I found a very beautiful woman with red hair sitting on a chair opposite her desk. After seeing herself coming, the woman stood up, looked at Yi Yu and said very sincerely, Mr. Yi, hello, I'm sorry to bother you again. But please believe me, I really need this job. After all, I still have an elderly mother who needs to be taken care of. So please give me a chance. Looking at this beautiful and outrageous woman, she had a pitiful expression. Yi Yu sighed and then sat back on his desk seat. Natasha Romanoff, huh? Looking at the red-haired woman in front of him, Yi Yu sighed and said, but the problem is I really don't need a secretary. Yi Yu actually doesn't object to things like secretary, just like Pepper and Tony Stark. However, the reason why Yi Yu has not yet been equipped with a secretary in life is because Wanda always smiles sweetly at herself, and then counts on her fingers that there are still 32 months until she becomes an adult, and then she has to become an adult. My secretary stays with me every day. Another point is, if the beautiful woman in front of me is an ordinary person and needs such a job, then I can help her find a job in the newspaper. You must know that the Bugle newspaper has many high-quality beauties. It's a pity, although the beautiful and outrageous woman in front of me is indeed more beautiful than the woman in the newspaper office or even the publishing house under my own name, but her name is Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff, the famous Black Widow known by people in the world Widow Sister. Born in the Red House, there is also a girl named Yelena. Keek far away. Actively serving in SHIELD, is an agent in SHIELD to be precise. It's not SHIELD but Snake and Shield. Although the boss of SHIELD is that black braised egg, the SHIELD under his leadership is still the Snake Shield Bureau. Because of this, Yi Yu doesn't want to have anything to do with them. After all, whether he is targeted by SHIELD or Snake and Shield, he will be in great trouble. So looking at the pitiful Natasha Romanoff in front of him, Yi Yu shrugged his shoulders and said very seriously, you mean, you still have an old mother to take care of, so you need this job? Yes, Mr. Yi. Without batting an eye, Natasha Romanoff weaves a lie that makes the listener sad and the listener cry. I have no father since I was a child and my mother brought me up alone. But when I was 19, a car accident made the family's poor family worse. For this reason, I had to suspend school to take care of my mother. As she said that, tears flickered in the widow's eyes. I've been working outside all these years while taking care of my mother with meager income, but the boss of my previous job wanted to. I definitely won't agree to such an unreasonable request. Although I don't have money, I know I can't do anything. Seeing tears in her eyes, speaking righteously, and wanting to portray herself as a widow sister who has experienced suffering in the world, but is always strong and unyielding, Yi Yu nodded slightly. But I don't have any income now. The widow sighed softly, then looked at Yi Yu mournfully, and her tone was full of pleading. So Mr. Yi, I need this job very much. Please give me a chance, I promise I can do this job of. The reason why I chose the Bugle newspaper is that the Bugle newspaper always upholds truth, justice, and giving ordinary people the truth about everything. On the other hand, you are a true philanthropist. As far as I know, the Bugle newspaper has helped many people in need. Therefore, I think you are an upright, kind, and responsible boss. That's why I came here to apply for the job. I hope, Mr. Yi, you can give me a chance. Looking at the lovely and pitiful widow sister, Yi Yu's expression was full of sympathy, but in fact, he was clapping constantly in his heart. She really deserves to be a famous widow sister. Her acting skills are good. It's a pity that I didn't become an actor, otherwise I would have been an Oscar queen long ago. Zahem. After clearing his throat, he was about to say something when there was a knock on the door of the office. The one who came in was none other than Matthew, who was wearing sunglasses and holding a blind cane. Boss, there is something you need to deal with. While talking, Matthew handed over a file. When I opened the file, I saw that it clearly said, "Everything this woman said is a lie. She is not an ordinary person. Although I don't know what her purpose is, it is best not to provoke this kind of person. So please don't believe anything she says." Looking at the content written on the document, Yi Yu nodded lightly and then smiled at Matthew. "I see, don't worry, I know how to deal with it." Hearing what Yi Yu said, Matthew nodded and said, "Then boss, I'll go out first, I still have several cases in my hand. Go if you need anything, come to me anytime, you know." "Thank you, boss." Matthew nodded and then left Yi Yu's office. Watching Matthew leave, Yi Yu put the documents in his hand on the table and then looked at Natasha Romanoff, who was looking at him with a pitiful expression. Then he smiled and said, "Then he or she, I'm sorry about your life experience. I didn't expect such a miserable experience for a beautiful lady like you. For this reason, I express my sympathy." Saying that, Yi Yu picked up the phone, then looked at Natasha Romanoff and said with a smile, "But I'm sorry, I really don't need secret techniques here, but I have a friend. He needs someone to help. Oh yes, his name is Tony Stark, yes, the famous Tony Stark. I think maybe he can provide you with a better job. Yes, if you don't push the matter to Tony at this time, can you still be a good friend?" Who told that last time that guy Tony went out to play with Hollywood actresses, but when Peppo asked, he all pushed it on Yi Yu. Yes, you read that right, this is a good friend. Hey, did you hear that the members of the Fire Wolf gang were wiped out by Mr. Jin Bing's men? Yes, more than 50 people were all wiped out overnight. Even the stronghold was burned. Isn't this a normal thing in our Hell's Kitchen? What's the fuss about? Hearing the people around him talking, a middle-aged man with muscles all over his body glanced at them and then said with disdain, "What do you know? Let me tell you, it's the group of people from the Fire Wolf gang who provoked them. It's someone who shouldn't be messed with." "Oh, we know, didn't we just offend Mr. Jin Bing?" A young man raised his eyebrows when he heard the middle-aged man's words and said proudly, "Let me tell you, my house is not far from the stronghold of Huabin yesterday. After hearing the movement, I sneaked over the window and looked over. The person who did it last night was Mr. Jin Bing's #1 officer, Bullseye himself." Hearing the young man's beaming words, the muscular man sneered. "That's right, Mr. Bullseye did it himself last night. And the reason is that the leader of the Fire Wolf gang, Laurent, who didn't want to die, provoked Mr. Yi. That guy actually wanted to send someone to assassinate Mr. Yi, but what happened?" "What happened?" The muscular man held a toothpick in his mouth and then said mockingly, "Mr. Jin Bing said that anyone in Hell's Kitchen who dares to provoke Mr. Yi will die, but there are some people who don't believe in evil. Tell me such a person, if you don't die, who will die?" "Mr. Yi, that Mr. Yi." Seeing the mocking expression on the muscular middle-aged man, everyone gathered around and asked curiously, "Do you still remember the Bugle newspaper's report on the business of the Fire Wolf gang some time ago?" The muscular man glanced at the curious crowd and asked softly, "Definitely. I heard that this report by the Bugle News directly caused the members of the Fire Wolf gang to lose millions." "The Horn newspaper, could it be?" "That's right." The muscular man saw someone react, and then he smiled and said, "In fact, the founder of Bugle newspaper is named Yi, which is Mr. Yi in my mouth. It's just a few million losses. That guy Laurent dared to find someone to kill Mr. Yi. If Mr. Yi hadn't been so capable, he might have met a poisonous hand. Mr. Jin Bing said that provoking Mr. Yi is provoking him himself. You say, should Laurent's people die?" Hearing what the muscular man said, everyone nodded in a sudden realization. Only a young man outside looked at everyone thoughtfully, then turned and left quietly. After the young man left, he took out his phone and made a call. After picking up the phone, he quickly told what happened last night. After hanging up the phone, the young man wandered around Hell's Kitchen like a normal person again and soon came to his workplace, Trident Building, the 73rd floor. Phil Coulson knocked on the office door, and after hearing the order to come in, he opened the door and walked into the office. Director, this is the news about the destruction of the Fire Wolf Gang last night in New York's Hell's Kitchen. Phil Coulson handed the sordid documents to Nick Fury, and at the same time nodded to Natasha Romanoff, who was preparing to accept a new task across Nick Fury's desk. After receiving the document from Phil Coulson, Nick Fury glanced at it, then nodded and said, "I see you can go to work first, Phil Coulson." "Okay." Phil Coulson walked out of the office smiling. After Phil Coulson left, Nick Fury handed the document to the widow sister. "See for yourself, Natasha Romanoff, maybe we're right." After taking the document, the widowed sister took a careful look at the complete conversation about the Fire Wolf Gang yesterday and the muscular man. The relationship between Yi Yu and Jin Bing may have a slight connection, but this does not mean that Yi Yu is a supernatural ability user. The widow put down the file, then looked at Nick Fury and asked, "No, actually, I've already confirmed the thing about Yi Yu being a supernatural ability user." While talking, Nick Fury handed Natasha Romanoff the photo of the unlucky guy who fell from upstairs yesterday afternoon. In fact, this guy wanted to assassinate Yi Yu with a sniper rifle yesterday afternoon on the only way Yi Yu's car must pass. But before he could shoot, he just jumped down as if he lost his mind. And this the man was hired by Laurent. It's a pity that the man died, otherwise we would know after passing the special instrument test. So what? When the widow heard what Nick Fury said, she couldn't help but spread her hands and said, "He didn't give me any chance to get close at all, as if he knew my identity, but in fact he couldn't possibly know. So you still need to continue to work hard. Be sure to stay by his side and investigate his ability." Nick Fury looked at the widow sister and said very seriously, "In fact, his appearance reminded me of someone. Do you still remember the cavalry incident back then? I suspect that Yi Yu is just like that little girl, so dangerous." Hearing about the Iron Cavalry incident, the widow's sister had a casual expression but finally became serious. As a member of SHIELD, she naturally knows what the cavalry incident represents. The Iron Cavalry incident had a great impact, and I'm afraid everyone knew about it, except those novices who had just come out of the Eagle's Nest from SHIELD. What was Melinda May like back then? That's an elite figure with an action team, but it was because of the little girl in the Iron Cavalry incident that a field elite expert was now changed to a civilian job. Both Nick Fury and his good friend Phil Coulson feel sorry for Melinda. After all, this Melinda, like her brother, was trained by Miss Peggy Carter. If it weren't for the girl in Bahrain Island who can control people's minds, Melinda might not be at level 7 now. That's why, Natasha Romanoff, I need you to approach Yi Yu. Nick Fury looked at the widow very seriously and said, "Controlling other people's hearts, what a terrifying ability, you should be very clear about it." Taking this incident alone, what happened to the killer who wanted to kill Yi Yu? Before he could even make a move, he was directly controlled by his mind and then jumped off the stairs. You must know that according to the calculation of the route, Yi Yu has the ability to control other people's minds, and the range is at least a kilometer. Once such a person does evil, I can't imagine what kind of tragedy will happen. Having said that, Nick Fury stood up, walked to the window and looked at the clear sky outside. Above the blue sky, dots of white clouds were constantly blowing with the wind. 3 years ago, when he first controlled other people's minds, it was to adopt those poor siblings. After all, according to his age at that time, he hadn't qualified to adopt Wanda and Pietro siblings. However, that was the only time he had a recorded situation. He has been very low-key these years. Sometimes I wonder if he is a supernatural ability user. Saying that, Nick Fury turned his head, looked at Natasha Romanoff with his one good eye and said very seriously, "From the perspective of SHIELD's attention to his resume, he has never done anything bad and he is still in that tradition. A good old man in the sense. Helping ordinary people, the Bugle newspaper has exposed one bad thing after another. He is low-key humble and seems to be a perfect person. But I don't believe that there are still perfect people in this world, even if it was the captain back then." While speaking, Nick Fury walked back to his seat, then looked at Natasha Romanoff and said very seriously, "Maybe I, or SHIELD, shouldn't focus on such a good person, but I have always been interested in the world. Maintain a high degree of suspicion and vigilance in everything. He hasn't done bad things now, but it doesn't mean he won't do bad things in the future. He's just 19 years old. Although he seems very mature, he has written many best-selling books and is worth billions. He gives people the impression of being extremely successful. But don't forget, he is only 19 years old after all, and he is still a young man. I am very happy to see a person like this who has funds, connections, and a sense of justice. and is willing to do good things for ordinary people. But a 19-year-old youth still needs someone to guide him, not to mention his strength is still very strong. So I don't want him to go astray because of his temporary youthful spirit. What I hope to see is a person with justice. A sexy superhero appears instead of a super criminal. Natasha Romanoff, people like him are important to this world. So I hope you can guide him, we can't expect. And we can't make decisions for others, so we can't force him to be a superhero, but ours the bottom line is that such a person with a sense of justice and strength cannot be allowed to go astray. Looking at Nick Fury's very serious eyes, Natasha Romanoff nodded slightly, just about to say something, but smiled wryly. I know you expect a lot from him, but Nick, there's no way I can get close to him. Natasha Romanoff also sighed. You know my past, I did a lot of things wrong, so I don't want him to go down my old path because of impulse like him. But the problem now is that he doesn't give me a chance to approach him and guide him at all. The widow spread her arms and said with a speechless expression, This is the first time I've seen someone who is not moved by my plea, and even wants to introduce me to Stark Industries and be Tony Stark's secretary. Having said that, the widow was speechless for a while. She knew that Guy Yu had a good relationship with Tony Stark, but this is too good, how can it be like this? If it weren't for knowing Tony Stark's character, Natasha Romanoff would think that Yu and Tony are true love regardless of each other. After all, that guy Tony has praised Yu's genius countless times in front of the media. I believe you will find a way. Nick Fury's eyes twitched when he heard the name Tony Stark. You know, this guy is not a worry-free guy. But having said that, after being in contact with Tony Stark for a long time, will you become uneasy? Well, thinking of Tony Stark's life, Nick Fury suddenly thought about it, seemingly. It seems that there is no one among young people who does not yearn for this guy's life. What's more, Yu is only 19 years old. Looking at Nick Fury, who narrowed his eyes, Natasha Romanoff immediately stood up, and while walking outside he said, I naturally have my own way about Yu's matter. Don't use your brain, or if he gets mad, I'm afraid it will cause great disaster. You don't want him to be the last thing you want. After speaking, Natasha Romanoff left Nick Fury's office without waiting for Nick Fury's answer. Ask for flowers, ask for evaluation votes. Xiaoju wants to add more. 3 days later inside the playground. How wonderful. Listening to Wanda laughing like silver bells on the pirate ship, Natasha Romanoff on the side said with emotion, I really envy children of this age who can be carefree. If you want to take a pirate ship, you can take a pirate ship. If you want to play the Ferris wheel, you can play the Ferris wheel. If given a choice, I believe they would not want the life they have now. Yu shook his head lightly and then said to Natasha Romanoff, But then again, I really don't need. Give me a reason. Natasha Romanoff turned her head, looked at Yu and said very seriously, Don't profuse me, I need a clear reason for you to reject me. This is the 5th time, I don't understand why you always reject me. Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu and said very seriously, Reason. Looking at the widow with a serious face, Yu thought for a while and then said, I don't want 10 years later in the country of death I will hold your hand on the edge of the cliff, and you beg me to let you go, although it makes me cry, but the problem is I don't need it. Seeing Yu with a serious face, the widow frowned suddenly. She didn't understand what Yu was talking about. She definitely doesn't know any of this anymore. Who knows, in the movie theater in the previous life, when Hawkeye and the widow sister were fighting each other to jump off the cliff, and then one softly begged to let go on the edge of the cliff, and the other refused to let go, a certain fool and the movie theater like other idiots, they were crying like hell. On the one hand, this is the reason. Well, on the other hand, I am just a newspaper owner. Although I also have some abilities that ordinary people don't have, I haven't done anything bad. There is no need for SHIELD to come and watch, and actually sent the widow over, this is too much. Natasha Romanoff naturally didn't understand what Yu was talking about, but she still frowned and said, I need a very serious answer. Well, maybe we should have a good talk, I think. Before Natasha Romanoff could finish speaking, Wanda, who came down from the pirate ship, ran to Yu with a smile on her face, took Yu's arm very skillfully, and then said with a smile on her face, Brother Yu, I still want to do it. Roller coaster. Okay, then go sit down. Have fun today, and it's a holiday anyway, so you don't have to go to class tomorrow. Gently scratched Wanda's nose and then said dotingly, Away. Wanda giggled, then pulled Pietro, who looked unwilling, and walked in the direction of the roller coaster. Looking at Pietro, whose face was full of rejection, but was threatened by Wanda to accompany him on the roller coaster, Yu laughed very unkindly. This made Pietro look unrequited. By the way, my own sister, looking at Wanda's fist, let's reluctantly admit that this is his sister. In this family, Pietro always felt that he was always the one being bullied. Wanda is doted on by himself and Yu, but Wanda looks towards Yu everywhere, and his biological younger brother is always disliked by Wanda in various ways, alas. But looking at Wanda with an excited face, Pietro suddenly felt that this seemed to be a good idea. At least since she and Wanda were adopted by Yu, the smile on her face has increased perhaps. That's enough. Seriously, I need to talk to you. Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu, then glanced at the other people around her, and then naturally took Yu's arm like a couple in love whispering. Will not attract the attention of others. Definitely some people may envy Yu after all. Natasha Romanoff is really very beautiful. Before Yu took out his arm, Natasha Romanoff said in a low voice, "You should know my identity, that's why you keep refusing me to enter your Horn newspaper office." Well, listening to Natasha Romanoff's words, Yu subconsciously raised his brows. Did he admit it? Or did you take the initiative to speak out? Yes, I am indeed an agent of SHIELD. With a very sweet smile, Natasha Romanoff gives others a sense of happiness like a girl in love who is dazzled by love. I was ordered to sneak into your side. In fact, it is because SHIELD discovered that you are a super ability user, so in order to prevent you from doing things that endanger the world, you need to be supervised. But I'm curious, how did you discover my true identity? Is it because of your very special abilities, for example, mind reading or something? Seeing the curious expression on Widow Sister's face, Yu thought for a while, then shook his head and said, I don't know how to read minds, but that's not important. What matters is how did you find out that I have abilities that ordinary people don't have? You know I almost never use it. Especially in all places that may be monitored. You underestimate SHIELD. Looking at the curious Yu, Natasha Romanoff replied with a smile. So, that's why you guys noticed something was wrong. Inside the cafe. Looking at the photos taken 3 years ago, Yu smiled wryly and shook his head. I really didn't think carefully back then. I didn't expect that even going through the adoption procedures would let you find out the slightest mistake. Looking at the photo, the staff member who helped him through the adoption procedures for Wanda and Pietro under the interference and confusion of his own mental power. Yu then laughed. But at the same time, Yu also had a new understanding of the control of SHIELD when he watched movies in his previous life. He knew that there were many departments in SHIELD able to find out. Actually, this is just a coincidence. If you want to blame it, you happen to run into an agent of SHIELD working there that day, and he was the first to discover something wrong. After all, a 16-year-old child wants to adopt 2 children a few years younger than him, and the staff agreed. This is too sci-fi. Natasha Romanoff held the coffee in front of her, took a sip, then looked at Yu and said, Don't think that SHIELD is so powerful. Well, maybe SHIELD is very powerful, but it can't control it anywhere. Well, that's why some supernatural abilities are monitored, which is why I appear in front of you. Saying that, Natasha Romanoff put the coffee in her hand on the table, then looked at Yu and said very seriously, Yi, I can call you that. Definitely. Yu nodded, motioning for her to continue. You are very smart, very talented, very kind, and very upright. These things can be discovered from the fact that SHIELD has paid attention to you and investigated your situation in the past few years. Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu and said very seriously, That's why we pay so much attention to you. After all, we really don't want you to go astray. A person like you, just 19 years old, is worth billions of dollars. He founded the Bugle newspaper, the publishing house, and published many best-selling books. The movies you authorized to remake can help you earn money, a large objective profit. It can be said that the sum of other people's lifetime may not necessarily make as much money as you in a year. The most important thing is that your ability is very strong. At least, the ability to control other people's thoughts is very powerful. Saying that, Natasha Romanoff sighed softly and then showed a bitter smile on his face. You don't know about my past, but I don't want you to go down my old path. Nick Fury thinks you need guidance. I hope you can become a superhero. At the very least, not being a super criminal. That's why he sent me over. Natasha Romanoff smiled, then pointed at herself and Yu and then said very seriously, I think maybe compared to SHIELD, other agents stay by your side, watch you and supervise you. It is the best result for me to stay by your side. At least I won't restrict your actions. If necessary, I will send people from SHIELD to help you. I just want you not to choose the most regrettable path, that's all. As for the superhero or something, it depends entirely on your will. Although I know that you are just 19 years old, but unlike other people who are provoked by other people's words and make hot-headed choices, you are very mature and have a personality that does not suit you. mature at age. That's great. So I know there's a good chance you've got everything planned for the future. So, what do you think of my proposal? Natasha Romanoff tilted her head, looked at EU with raised eyebrows and asked with a smile. Seeing the widow sister who has learned how to be cute, EU was speechless for a while. It's already so beautiful, but now it's starting to look cute again, it's too much. But maybe compared to other agents shot by SHIELD, maybe it's not bad for Natasha Romanoff to stay by her side. At least, EU is not sure whether the person SHIELD secretly photographed is from SHIELD or from Hydra. Just when EU was about to agree, the phone rang suddenly. Looking at the caller, EU smiled and said, "I'll answer the call." Walking to the side, as soon as he picked up the phone, he heard Tony Stark's extremely arrogant voice coming from the other end of the phone. "Hey buddy, how are you doing recently? Haha, let me just say I'm a super genius. Help me tell Wanda and Pietro, I have developed the super artificial intelligence learning machine they need now, and I have sent someone to your villa. Receive it when you have time. Oh, by the way, I'm driving now, I'm going to the airport, and I'm going to the desert to discuss some business. So when I come back, I hope to see the second part of the big detective series that I've been thinking about and write it out quickly. Stop fiddling with that magic wand boys book. Is that for the kids to see?" Listening to the other end of the phone, Tony, who didn't allow himself to say a word, kept talking to himself, and the smile on Yu's face gradually disappeared. According to the current point of time, Tony went to the desert. What will happen is self-evident. After all, it's this time that Iron Man will be born, only, as a friend should I remind him. Tony Stark, perhaps in the earliest comics, was just a second-tier superhero. But in the movie universe, he is absolutely well-deserved first brother treatment. It can be said that the 10 years of the Marvel movie universe was born by him and ended by him. Maybe another superhero will appear next, but the death of one of the Avengers Alliance's big three is doomed to the end of an era for Marvel. More importantly, even if Avengers may still have some superheroes we are familiar with in the next stage, Captain America is old, Iron Man is sacrificed, and the Widow Sister is dead. When the superheroes gather again, are they still the original Avengers? At least after seeing the ending, Yu in the previous life didn't want to watch the so-called Next Level 1 unfolding, like the Tenjin group, really didn't have as much expectation as before. This is my biggest impression after watching Avengers Alliance 4, but now I am living in the Marvel world. And Tony Stark, the man responsible for the development of the main line of the movie universe, is no longer the character in the movie in my impression. He is a living, flesh and blood friend who really exists in his own life. So as a friend, when you see a good friend in danger, shouldn't you remind him? If I remind myself, then in the future, will there be that guy with a mortal body who can stand shoulder to shoulder with a god? This is where Yu struggles the most. On the other end of the phone, after waiting for a long time, Yu didn't speak and Tony asked curiously, "Dude, why didn't you speak? Did you feel a bit embarrassed that the great detective couldn't be written?" "Haha, I just said, although you are also a genius compared to me, you are still a little bit worse. Don't worry, I've got JARVIS to help me try to write the second part, at least based on your first big detective series. Although it is not as vivid and flavorful as your writing, but at least you can read it. I will ask JARVIS to send it to your mailbox later, and you can see if there is any inspiration." Listening to Tony's hearty and triumphant laughter on the other end of the phone, Yu was silent for a while, and then asked in a low voice, "Tony, 3 days ago, I asked the people under my banner to give you the encryption U-disk. Didn't you read it?" "Huh, you mean the encrypted USB drive?" When Tony Stark heard what Yu said, his eyes lit up immediately as if he had thought of something, and then he said excitedly, "You mean that the second part has been written, and it was sent to me in a USB flash drive?" "Hey buddy, tell me earlier, I've been busy researching some things these days, and I didn't take care of them at all. If I knew it, I would have taken it with me. At least when I'm bored on the roads, and I can go together take a look. It's over, we're already on our way now, it's too late to turn around and go back." Tony patted the steering wheel and said to the Bluetooth headset with a helpless face, "Okay, let's talk about everything when you come back." Yu really wanted to open his mouth at this moment, and told him the evidence in the USB flash drive about the things Obadiah Stine did behind his back and using Stark Industries. But after thinking about it, he still didn't say it. Let Iron Man be born at least, the world without him is really boring. After hanging up the phone, Yu walked back to the coffee shop and then sat in front of Natasha Romanoff. "You want to spy on me?" "Yes, there is no problem at all." Yu looked at Natasha Romanoff and suddenly said very seriously, "I know your boss wants you to monitor me in all directions, That's fine, from now on, you are my secretary. You can follow me at any time by my side, the kind that monitors my every move. In addition, I will prepare a room for you in the villa, and you can move directly to my villa. Hearing you use words, Natasha Romanoff immediately showed a charming smile. Just about to say something, she suddenly heard you say, "Since you are already my secretary, then perform your duties. Two things: first, let the group behind you prepare a Quinjet fighter. I'm going to the desert. Second thing, these days when I'm away, let the people from SHIELD send some people over to protect the safety of Wanda and Pietro." Hearing what you said, Natasha Romanoff nodded lightly and said, "These two things are all right. But what are you going to do in the deserts?" "A friend of mine went." Yu shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "In fact, although I really hope that guy appears, I also hope to witness the birth of something. But I only hope that my friend will suffer less. At least in this way, you will feel more at ease." Listening to the confusing words, Natasha Romanoff nodded. Anyway, since she has been following him, she will naturally understand what he means by then. However, the young man in front of him seems to have a lot of mystery in him. Do you want it yourself? Gently shaking her head, the widow suppressed a thought in her heart. Well, at least not yet. I hate it here. As soon as she got off the plane, the widow raised her head and looked around, then said to Yu, "Yeah, poverty, chaos, and endless wars between various factions. It's really not a very good place." Glancing not far away, those who wore all kinds of clothes but were all skinny, looking like they hadn't eaten enough and had no strength, and those dilapidated houses made of mud, Yu tapped lightly. Nodded, "That's not what I said." Hearing Yu's emotion, Natasha Romanoff gave Yu a blank look with a smile and said, "I'm talking about the horrible weather here. It's too hot. Let's go to our base first." After the words fell, a jeep drove towards the two of them and soon stopped in front of the two of them. "Don't worry about this." Yu shook his head, then looked around and asked, "Where is the location of Tony Stark's weapon sales experiment? This time Tony Stark may be in danger." "You mean Tony Stark is in danger?" Natasha Romanoff, who was just about to get into the car, frowned immediately after hearing Yu's words. "How are you sure he's in danger? And if he's really in danger, why didn't you stop him on the phone?" Listening to the widow's question, Yu was silent for a while, then shook his head and said, "Some things, even if you tell them, you won't understand. I'm not here to prevent him from being taken away. I'm here to prevent him from suffering less." Speaking of this, Yu looked at Natasha Romanoff with a smile and said, "He regards me as a friend, I can feel it, so I also regard him as a friend. I am very happy to see him grow up after suffering some hardships. I will not participate in this process. I just try to reduce some of the hardships he has endured." His. Hearing Yu deliberately say some so-called clues, if Natasha Romanoff still can't understand the meaning of Yu's words, then she is not a widow sister. "We have requisitioned the car, you go back first." The widow sent away the agent at the SHIELD station who came to pick them up by car, and then said to Yu, "It seems that you trust me a lot." While talking, the widow sister took out her mobile phone, and then showed Yu the coordinates on the phone, and then gestured in the direction of the Jeep. Yu was driving, and Natasha Romanoff was sitting in the co-pilot, just like the one sitting in the stolen car in Captain America. The Winter Soldier, looking at Yu with a big sister expression. "So you have complete trust in our homeland strategy, in SHIELD." Halfway through the tongue-twisting name, I remembered what Yu said, and said the name SHIELD directly. "I don't trust SHIELD, never have." Yu shook his head, then turned his head while walking in the direction of the navigation destination, and said to Natasha Romanoff, "But I kind of believe you." "Why?" Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu curiously, tilted her head, and asked with a hoarse voice and a smile, "I can see some rough ideas. Although it doesn't work from time to time." Yu shrugged his shoulders with a smile. "There are some things he can't say, such as knowing what will happen in the future. But at the same time, I have to add some weight, especially in SHIELD. Then the Widow Sister is the best teleportation point. At least before the battle between SHIELD and Hydra, it is best to keep a negligible distance between myself and the Snake Shield Bureau. On the one hand, I want SHIELD to value me, and on the other hand, I want Hydra to be afraid of me. Only in this way can I do whatever I want and do whatever I want." "Can you see the future?" Natasha Romanoff heard Yu's words, looked at Yu curiously, and then suddenly laughed. "So what does my future look like? Occasionally perform missions with a guy holding a bow and arrow, and more often I lie lazily on the sofa in my villa, unwilling to move at all. In your words, such a good weather, in the why not be lazy when there is no task." Hearing Yi Yu's words, Natasha Romanoff, who was just joking, suddenly became serious. Putting his legs down, he looked at Yi Yu and said very seriously, "Can you really see the future?" "No." Seeing Natasha Romanoff's serious expression, Yi Yu laughed loudly. "Chi let you pretend to be an ordinary person in front of me again and again, wanting to get close to me. In fact, from the first time I saw you, I found out your identity as soon as I found out. So you know. When I saw you pretending to be an ordinary person and wanted to beg for a job, it was very hard for me to suppress my smile in order to cooperate with you." Hearing Yi Yu's words, thinking of how many times he came to the Horn newspaper to apply for a job, Yi Yu's eyes were weird. "At the beginning, I thought that it was my beauty that surprised him, but I never thought that this was the case." Thinking of how complacent she was at the beginning, the widow sister suddenly became a little angry from embarrassment. Opening his mouth, he bit Yi Yu's arm and said viciously, "Hurry up and forget about these things, don't tell anyone else, or I'll bite you to death." It's just that ferocious expression, coupled with the blushing cheeks and the somewhat angry and wronged eyes, no matter how you look at it, it's cute. Not convincing at all, thanks to the brothers for the flowers, finally broke the 1,000. Boom. Boom. Hearing the sound of explosions suddenly coming from a distance, the two subconsciously looked at each other, and both found that something was wrong. It stands to reason that if it was the place where Tony Stark displayed his weapons, it would definitely not be so close. Hearing the sound of the explosion, it would be more than 10 kilometers away. Then there is only one situation that can explain it, and that is that Tony Stark was attacked. Seeing his widow sister let go, Yi Yu slammed on the accelerator, and the car drove directly towards the scene of the accident. After arriving at the scene of the incident, I saw that some unlucky people who were displaying their weapons had all fallen to the ground at this moment, and many soldiers were also shot to death. And Tony Stark, at this moment, the white shirt inside his black suit was constantly bleeding out, and he was unconscious, being carried up to the car by a group of masked guys. Behind the sand dunes, seeing this scene, Natasha Romanoff immediately held two pistols in her hands from behind, and was about to rush forward to snatch Tony Stark back, but was stopped by Yi Yu the next moment. Natasha Romanoff is from SHIELD, so she naturally knows what Tony Stark means to SHIELD. Few people in SHIELD don't know that one of the three founders of SHIELD is Tony's father, Howard Stark. It was because of this that they would never let Tony Stark encounter death in a true sense. So Natasha Romanoff couldn't help but looked at Yi Yu strangely as she wanted to rush out to rescue Tony Stark, but was suddenly stopped by Yi Yu. If it wasn't for seeing Yi Yu's squinting eyes, his face turning ashen and the evil spirit emanating from the inside out, which didn't look like he was pretending, Natasha Romanoff would have thought that Yi Yu was the mastermind behind this time. Well, this idea flashed in my mind for less than a second before it was denied by Natasha Romanoff. After all, doing so would not benefit Yi Yu at all. Wait first. Without waiting for the widow to ask, Yi Yu said with an uneasy expression, "Rescuing Tony now is tantamount to killing him. And maybe this is an opportunity for Tony. The only thing we have to do now is wait. Then when will it be?" Natasha Romanoff looked at Yi Yu puzzled, then pointed to the group of guys who attacked Tony and the others were about to leave, and asked Yi Yu, "Believe me, at this moment I want to save Tony more than you do. In this world, I don't have many friends, so I will try my best to help every friend who is in trouble." Yi Yu glanced at Natasha Romanoff, and then there was a flash of nostalgia in his eyes. Tony is different. Maybe this time it will make him know what responsibility is. He needs this first metamorphosis. That's right, from a dandy billionaire to a superhero, Tony has experienced at least 3 metamorphoses in this process. And this is the first metamorphosis. Shutting down the Stark Industries weapons manufacturing division and helping those persecuted by his own weapons is the first time Tony Stark has learned something. Maybe this time is the beginning of Tony metamorphosis, but like I said, I don't have any friends. Even after coming to this world, I always feel like an outsider. So I value the existence of Wanda, Pietro, Tony, and others. At least their existence makes me feel that I am still alive. This world exists, not a dream. This feeling, Natasha Romanoff, you won't understand. Seeing the convoy gradually leaving, Yi Yu turned his head to look at Natasha Romanoff, and said with a cold tone and a very serious expression, "So I will not let any of these bastards who dare to hurt my friends be spared." After speaking, Yi Yu stood up and boarded the jeep. Natasha Romanoff also immediately sat in the co-pilot's seat, just looked at Yi Yu and didn't say much. At this moment, she could feel the cold, evil spirit emanating from Yi Yu's body, which is definitely not something that ordinary people can have. At first, I only thought that Yi Yu was just an ability capable of controlling other people's minds, but now it seems that I underestimated him too much. However, it seems that he really cares about his friends, or maybe, in fact, he is also lonely in his heart. So Natasha Romanoff thought, after all, according to the files SHIELD pulled up on him, he was all alone before adopting Wanda and Pietro. No family, no relatives, she is the most aware of this strong sense of loneliness. Perhaps he is the same kind of person as himself. Under the tough exterior, there is a softness in his heart. Under the icy body, the heart yearns for a little warmth. Seeing the group of people driving the vehicle behind, Yi Yu had a very serious side face. Natasha Romanoff turned her head suddenly, and the smile on her face was printed on the window of the car. Perhaps the task of monitoring him and guiding him is also good. Is not it? The brothers are too powerful, the flowers are almost 2,000. Wow, there is a reward, nothing to say, add more. From the sunset month onwards, the frost will plummet. In the evening in the desert, the temperature changed from a hot day to a cold night. In a leeward part of the desert, a bonfire gradually rose. The warm flame seems to be able to drive away all the coldness in the night. If at the moment has another sip of spirits, it may be better. At least Natasha Romanoff thinks so. It's the first time I know that barbecue can be so delicious. Natasha Romanoff looked at Yi Yu and smiled while eating the barbecued meat on the iron stick. However, why did those guys bring you food and water? Yi Yu didn't answer, just pointed to his head lightly with his finger. Oh yes, I forgot, you can control their minds. Having said that, Natasha Romanoff opened her big bright eyes, looked at Yi Yu with a very curious smile and asked, "Then can you control my mind?" "There is no way." Yi Yu shook his head slightly, then looked at Natasha Romanoff and said very seriously, "I have no way to control other people's minds. I just use my mental power to destroy the cognition in their minds. Then use mental power to construct an idea into them, so that they will obediently listen to me. Definitely this time can't be too long. One is that it consumes more of my mental power, and the other is that over time, people whose mental power has been destroyed by me will turn into a mess in the head, and then the whole person will become a fool." Hearing what Yi Yu said, the widow sister nodded lightly. "I see, but this is also very powerful. Doesn't that mean that as long as someone wants to do something to you, you can immediately change it into a dementia?" "Almost. But it also depends on the mental strength of the other party." Yi Yu glanced at the piece of meat in his hand that was roasted, picked it up and sprinkled it with seasonings and said while eating, "If the other party's mental power is stronger, I can only increase the control of mental power. Directly kill his mental power. If it is an ordinary person, then I only need to use a small amount of energy to control him." Sprinkling seasoning on the meat is actually not as delicious as imagined. After all, there are only 1 or 2 seasonings in this ghost place. However, let's take a bite. Let's talk about it after we get Tony back. Lying on the sand covered with cloth, looking at the twinkling stars in the night sky, Natasha Romanoff suddenly laughed. The smile on her face at this moment is so pure and clean, especially under the rendering of that layer of starlight. The whole person is like an unborn child, without any worldly dirt at all. What a beautiful starry sky. Pillowing her hands, Natasha Romanoff looked at the stars and moonlight, which were obviously brighter than those in the city, and couldn't help whispering softly. "The last time I could enjoy the starry sky with peace of mind was when I was very young. I don't know who my father is, and my mother just told me that my father is above the sky, and the brightest star is my father. He is guarding me in the sky." When I was young, I was very naive. I really thought that turning into the brightest starlight is the incarnation of my father. As he said, a trace of nostalgia and sadness flashed in Natasha Romanoff's eyes. "But then I entered the notorious Red House. Oh, you may not know what a Red House is, but it doesn't matter. You just need to know the people who came out of the Red House are all people with blood on their hands, so you will understand. It was at that time that I realized that everything was a lie. The incarnation of the father, the brightest star, and even the mother were all fake. Later, like many black widows, my hands were stained with sin. It was Clint who saved me. He brought me into SHIELD. Only then did I avoid being hunted down again and again." Speaking of Clint Barton, the widow showed a smile on her face. That guy is so stupid. He always tells me that his daughter is very capable and will definitely inherit his name of Hawkeye. But he doesn't know that, in fact, that little girl has no interest in bows and arrows at all. Although I have entered SHIELD, I have a home, but the day-to-day tasks make me really tired. And I know this is not my home. I'm like a strand of duckweed between heaven and earth. Every place is just a stay, and there is no place where I can stay forever. As she said that, Natasha Romanoff flashed a hint of self-mockery on her face. Perhaps just like what Mother said, I am an ominous person, not worthy of having the family that ordinary people yearn for, and I am born to belong to blood and fire. But this starry sky is really beautiful. One memory after another flashed in my mind, and then I quietly looked at the starry sky in the sky, and then closed my eyes, as if I wanted to integrate my whole body into the galaxy. Perhaps only where can you find your own eternity? As an extremely good agent, as an existence that has survived countless life and death struggles, she definitely knew that there was something wrong with her emotions. She must have said that she wanted to try her mental power, so this brat used her mental power to interfere with her. But she doesn't care that much anymore. At this moment, she just wants to close her eyes and blend into the sky full of stars, and enjoy a moment of peace that she has never experienced for a long time, under the same starry sky at the same time by the same campfire. So I can only survive on this battery for the car now. Tony Stark was constantly stirring the mashed potatoes in front of him with a spoon, and then laughed at himself. I'm afraid no one would have thought that Tony Stark, a dignified billionaire and genius inventor, would have fallen to this point. Need relying on batteries to maintain life. But at least you're still alive, aren't you? Hearing Tony Stark's self-mockery in front of him, Ethan didn't care at all. Instead, he said with a smile, "As long as you're alive, you'll still have a chance. As long as you're alive, you'll have the ability to do whatever you want." A chance. Hearing Ethan's words, Tony Stark gave Ethan a sneering look, and then said sarcastically, "What chance does a person who relies on batteries to maintain his life have? And no one knows that I was arrested here. From the inside to the outside, everyone is yours. What chance do I have?" After reacting, Tony Stark raised his head, glanced thoughtfully at Ethan in front of him, and then nodded slightly. "Well, thanks. You don't have to thank me, I'm just doing what I can." Ethan took a bite of the mashed potatoes in his hand, then looked at Tony and said, "I'm not thanking you for this." Tony Stark pointed to the battery, then looked at Ethan and said, "I'm thankful you're not one of them. Maybe this is the best news I've heard so far." Seeing Tony Stark's haggard face, Ethan chuckled softly. "Actually, I don't know what they want to do when they arrest you. However, if they really want to kill you, they won't save you. But if there is no accident, it will be difficult for us to leave here, and they will even do something to you. If that's the case, do you have any unfinished regrets?" Ethan stirred the mashed potatoes in the jar, then asked Tony Stark. "Pity." After a moment of silence, Tony Stark suddenly laughed. "It's too much. I haven't played games with next year's cover girl, and I haven't seen you use second big detective series. I still want to eat a cheeseburger." "Want to?" Shaking his head slightly, Tony Stark looked at the cave wall and then said slowly, "I think, after hearing the news of my disappearance, Peppo must be very sad. Her eyes must be red and swollen from crying, already." As Tony Stark's voice fell, neither of them thought of talking. Tony thought of Peppo and hoped that all this was just a dream. When he opened his eyes again, he would be lying on a soft bed, and the mechanical assistant Zaire Aguai, whom he always disliked, would be sent to the Bugle newspaper, as well as milk and coffee. After washing himself, while eating breakfast and drinking coffee, he watched the reporters from the Bugle newspaper reporting some things that the public thought were very fair in order to attract attention. From time to time, I also publish my photos. Definitely, every time around this time, Peppo would walk in, urging himself and tidying up that nasty suit for himself. Oh, by the way, in the dark, the second part of the detective series that seems to attract me very much will also be released. And I must convince that guy who is almost as talented as me. Selling the film and television copyright to myself, at that time no one will be able to play the detective. Maybe when I have a whim, I might make such a movie. It won't be shown at that time, but it will be played for myself. After all, that detective seems to be a gift for himself in the dark. Tony Stark fell into a beautiful fantasy, and Ethan on the opposite side was also silent. Any chance of escaping? Maybe, maybe not. However, I really miss my family, and really want to go back to that village and take a look. Presumably without their own care, their cemetery should be covered with thorns and weeds. I don't know if they will be very lonely if I am not here, but probably not after all. My wife is in heaven and there are children with her. Can be myself. Ah, the two people who were both in deep thought didn't realize that on the gray surveillance screen, a group of kidnappers were watching them. Let him rest tonight and start tomorrow. Let him develop the Jericho missile for us. Clear. Hearing the bald leader's words, the subordinates nodded, and then watched Tony Stark walk back to his simple bed with a disappointed face and ignored him. After all, it is good for him to be alive now. What more can he want? They all sleep on hard slates. Wow, 1900 flowers, more than 130 evaluation votes. Thank you, brothers and sisters, it's too strong. What? Ask for a little more flowers and evaluation votes. Well, there will be another update in a while. The next morning, the sun gradually rose in the sky. The warm sun gradually dissipated the coldness in the desert night, and the temperature gradually rose. Natasha Romanoff, who was sleeping in Yiyu's arms, kicked the blanket away subconsciously, then stretched a lot, and then slowly opened her eyes. Last night was the most peaceful and comfortable sleep she had had in so many years. Good morning. Yiyu was awakened, then sat up, looked around, and took the washing tools from the car. Passed a pair to the widow and then while washing, asked with a smile, "Did you sleep well last night?" "Well, it's really good." The widow stood up refreshed, with a relaxed look on her brows. The desert that seems to be getting hotter is no longer a worry. It's been a long time since I fell asleep so peacefully. The widow looked at Yiyu and then said with a smile, "If your newspaper goes bankrupt in the future, then you can become a very qualified psychotherapist. Your mental power is very strong." As soon as the voice fell, there was a sound of footsteps from the side. Turning his head, he found that it was the unlucky guy who was controlled by Yiyu with mental power yesterday. I saw this unlucky guy slowly walking towards this side, with 2 buckets of water and some food in his hand. Mr. Yi, Tony Stark woke up last night. Everything is normal now, but his condition is not very good. But today our leader will let him study the Jericho missile. Hearing this person's report, Yiyu nodded lightly and said, "I see you can leave now." "Okay, Mr. Yi." After hearing Yiyu's words, the unlucky guy nodded and left. After he left, Natasha Romanoff looked at Yiyu and asked while holding the washing tool, "What are you waiting for? What direction will things develop?" "When shall we do it?" "Wait." Yiyu took the slate and cooked food by the bonfire, then looked at the widow sister and said, "Tony's situation is not very good now, especially as you heard yesterday. He is now relying on the battery to maintain his life. In this case, even if we rescue him now, he has no way to leave here." "Then what to do?" Hearing Yiyu's words, the widow put down the washing tool in her hand with some concern. "No matter what, Tony Stark must not die, at least after we know his whereabouts. He cannot die." "I definitely know this." Yiyu looked at Natasha Romanoff and said very seriously, "You have to believe one thing, Natasha Romanoff, Tony is a genius, there is no doubt about it. I believe he will definitely figure out a way to get rid of the battery life. I am very sure of this. And when he can get rid of the battery, it's time for us to do it." Seeing Yiyu's swearing face, the widow sister had no choice but to nod. "I hope you are right, otherwise the consequences may be unpredictable." While speaking, the widow's cell phone rang. After picking up the phone, I heard Nick Fury's voice from the opposite side. "Natasha Romanoff, you and Yiyu are in the desert right now. There is news that Tony Stark's convoy was attacked and many people died. More importantly, Tony Stark is missing. I don't know if Tony Stark is still alive, but since he is missing and not dead, then there is a very high chance that he is still alive. I think you and Yiyu left New York for this purpose, right? So hang on, I'll send someone to support you right away." Listening to Nick Fury's words on the other end of the phone, Natasha Romanoff nodded, glanced at Yiyu, and said very seriously, "I know the exact location where Tony Stark was kidnapped, but don't send anyone over now. Things are bad for Tony Stark right now, and it's not good for us SHIELD to launch a raid to get him out. So give me some time, Yiyu and I will find a way to rescue Tony Stark." "There is no need to send people to rescue." On the other end of the phone, Nick Fury, who was originally a little worried, suddenly became a little weird after hearing what the widow said. He was suspicious of everything by nature, but suddenly found that things didn't seem to be that simple. At least, Tony Stark had just left for the desert. Yiyu seemed to have received some news and immediately asked Natasha Romanoff to mobilize a Quinjet fighter as quickly as possible. Much like preparing for a rescue. If Yiyu knew all of this, why didn't he remind Tony Stark? Unless this matter has something to do with him or he wants to see this scene. However, according to Yiyu's past, he and Tony Stark do not have any mutual hostility. On the contrary, the relationship between these two people is not bad. So, then there is only one explanation for the truth. Thinking of this, Nick Fury suddenly asked Natasha Romanoff, "Natasha Romanoff, do you still remember what happened on April 7th? "April 7. The widow raised her eyebrows and suddenly laughed. "Don't worry, I know what I'm talking about and what I'm doing. Barton was the one who brought me back to the SHIELD base that day, so I wasn't controlled. Believe me, everything is under Yiyu's control, and he will give you an explanation when he goes back. I promise it's beyond your expectation. The 6th update is complete and the edition is complete. Please ask for flowers and evaluation tickets so that Zyoju can continue to add updates tomorrow. It's not a good time being locked in a cave, especially after some torture. I won't make mission weapons for them." Laughing at himself, Tony stared blankly at the bonfire in front of him and said, Stark Industries started with weapons, and it also made me a billionaire. But who would have thought that I, a notorious weapons dealer, would die because I didn't want to make weapons for this group of people? How ironic, isn't it? Tony smiled and shook his head, then raised his head, looked at Ethan and said, I thought the weapons I made were to help people gain peace. But in fact, I was wrong. The greater purpose of weapons is to harvest lives. How are we controlling it? So I will never make any kind of weapon for their group of people who kill innocent people indiscriminately. Perhaps everyone's evaluation of me is not so good. I am arrogant, a B asterisk 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 D, arrogant and arrogant. But I still there is a little bit of pride that belongs to me. The bottom line in my Tony Stark heart, the last trace of pride does not allow me to bow my head in order to survive, and humbly beg for life to those guys. Even betray my conscience in order to survive, I can't do it. Looking at Tony Stark, who was clenching his fist and staring at him, Ethan was silent for a while, then nodded and said, You are indeed not a gentleman, and your evaluation of yourself just now is also very fair. In fact, even if you make weapons for them, I don't think they will let you go. After all, your energy is so great that no one can ignore your existence. Well, that's it. Hearing Ethan's words, Tony smiled wryly and spread his arms. I'm going to die anyway, so why don't I do something good before I die? At least I don't want anyone to ruin their family because of the weapons I made. Just like the pair of siblings, although they have no direct relationship with me, I always feel a little guilty about them. I don't want these things to happen. Otherwise, even if my soul enters heaven, it will be difficult to rest in peace. Hearing these heartbreaking words, Ethan sighed and stopped talking. He just fiddled with the bonfire in front of him, not knowing what he was thinking. While the two were silent, suddenly, there was a movement from the iron gate of the cave. After hearing the sound, the two looked back subconsciously, only to find that the inspection hole of the iron door used to monitor them had been pulled open. Then a guy with a weapon glanced at the two people through the viewing hole, and then threatened. You two had better not have any plans. The reason why you are still alive now is because you still have a little use value. Well, if you have any thoughts that you shouldn't have, then today is your death day. As he said that, the guy pointed at them through the viewing hole with his hand, and then closed the viewing hole again. Seeing the guy who suddenly appeared and warned them, both of them were a little puzzled. You must know that in the cave, there are monitors installed to monitor them on the spot at any time, and if there are threats, it is usually a group of people who come in to threaten them, rather than through the viewing hole. Somewhat confused, Ethan glanced at Tony Stark, only to find that Tony Stark stood up and walked towards the iron gate with a puzzled look on his face. Tony. Ethan wanted to ask, but was stopped by Tony Stark. I saw Tony Stark walk to the iron gate, and after realizing that it was a blind spot of monitoring, he bent down and picked up a small ball of paper that suddenly appeared on the ground. Looking at the contents on the small ball of paper, Tony Stark clenched his fists instantly, with a look of ecstasy on his face. But in order not to be discovered, Tony looked around subconsciously, then held the small paper ball in his hand, pretending that nothing happened, and walked back to the campfire. Then very discreetly threw the small ball of paper into the fire. What's wrong? Seeing the irrepressible ecstasy in his eyes, Ethan asked Tony Stark curiously. Just now I received a ball of paper which said, on the 3rd day of April, Holmes said to Mrs. Riley, the weather is getting colder, take care of your body. Tony Stark forcibly suppressed the ecstasy in his heart, and then whispered to Ethan. Hearing the trill in Tony Stark's voice, Ethan was a little confused. So, this is what Holmes said to Watson. The original meaning was to tell Watson through secret words that he has found the location of the kidnapped person, so that Watson can take care of himself with peace of mind. As he said that, Tony Stark clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes of surprise were constantly conveyed through his eyes. That damned B asterisk 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 D found me, haha, we are saved. The bloody B asterisk 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 D. Ethan looked at Tony Stark blankly, and was about to say something when he saw Tony Stark fiddling with the battery in front of him, then raised his eyebrows and said excitedly, This is an absolute genius just like me. B asterisk 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 D, this secret phrase was so abrupt in the book back then, it was that B asterisk 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 D who told me the meaning. So Ethan, I need your help now. I want to get rid of this life-sustaining battery at least. I can't let that guy see me like this, otherwise, maybe he will laugh at me when I go back. Tony Stark was very excited at this moment. After all, in Tony Stark's heart, since he found his place, he would definitely be able to save himself. This is the trust between friend under the scorching sun. Seeing Tony Stark, who was holding the car battery in his left hand and constantly directing the transport of cannonballs and weapons into the cave with his right hand, Yu returned to the tent at a high place with peace of mind. At the moment, the widow is sitting on a chair in the tent, constantly playing video games. After seeing Yi Yu coming back, he asked without raising his head, "Did you see Tony Stark?" "Well, everything is going according to plan." Yi Yu nodded and then sat next to the widow sister, watching the widow sister control the characters on the game console to move around constantly, and said, "I guess after today we can take Tony back. Anyway, that's your friend, you can plan it yourself. I will be responsible for supporting it then." Then he may continue to control the characters to attack each level. When attacking the final boss, the game characters still die. Only then did he put down the game console in his hand with a look of reluctance, then looked at Yi Yu and said, "You two really have a tacit understanding. You wrote him an inexplicable sentence, and he really dared to believe you, and started to make things to survive, regardless of that you are just 19 years old this year, and he still doesn't know your skills. Under such circumstances, this trust is really rare. After all, if I were Tony Stark, after receiving your letter, I would definitely suspect immediately whether someone pretended to be you. I sent it. Even if it wasn't for someone pretending to be you to break through Tony's inner defense, I would still want to say, why did you find this place so easily, and whether you are with these people? After all, he and your Wanda and Pete Luo, there is still some hatred." Hearing Natasha Romanoff's words, Yi Yu smiled and shook his head but did not answer her words. The same thing in the cave, looking at Tony Stark who was dismantling the cannon head, Ethan asked the same question while helping. "He won't, and he's not that kind of person." Tony carefully removed the electromagnetic coil, and then put specially prepared soil into the crucible, and replied, "You don't know him, so it's normal to suspect him. This guy doesn't look young and he treats people very kindly. He doesn't seem to have any pretensions. In fact, this guy is actually a very proud guy in his heart. It's very similar to me. Whether he is facing ordinary people or facing billionaires or powerful people, he always keeps a smile. This guy's pride has been engraved in his bones. It's as if I know everything about you and there's nothing special about you. Sometimes I wonder where this guy has such a sense of pride." As he spoke, Tony Stark raised his head and then suddenly laughed. "When I met him for the first time, I admitted that I had a bad mouth and my speech was not pleasant. But when others were constantly flattering to me, only this guy always maintained a respect. Yeah, it's a tribute. I thought he was like the other admirers, just wanted to sign his autograph. But this guy turned around and threw the autograph in the trash can. It's like his homage is to Tony Stark, not mine. Does it make a difference? I'm Tony Stark and then, I'm the one who slaps him, he taunts me. I still lose the first time." As he spoke, Tony Stark had a nostalgic smile on his face. "Since then, every time the two of us meet, Peppo is the most helpless one. After all, neither of us wants to admit defeat, but we have to admit that this guy deserves to be able to write many bestsellers. And also bought the person who founded the newspaper. The average person really can't compare in terms of words, but it's also very strange." Tony tilted his head and then sighed. "The two people who are obviously mocking each other should be hostile to each other, but somehow I became friends with him. Well, I don't have any friends, I haven't had any for a long time, so I'm very sad, cherish this guy. So I also trust this guy. Although I don't know how this guy got here, I don't know what kind of resources and skills this guy used. But since he told me to take care of my health, he has a way to get me take it out, then I will trust him. It's that simple." After finishing speaking, Tony Stark turned around and began to talk about some palladium elements for smelting and adjustment, and then began to make electromagnetic equipment. Looking at the serious Tony Stark, Ethan thought about it and then stepped forward to help. Perhaps I should trust him in the same way, after all we seem to have no other choice. Who said no? Even if he doesn't come to save me, I still have a way to live. Tony, who has always been arrogant, couldn't help curling his lips after hearing Ethan's words. He just looked at the blueprint on the table, and he didn't know what he was thinking in his head. "I went to get the contract, and I forgot that May 1st is almost here, so I don't know if the editor will have a holiday. Should I mail it now or wait until after the holiday? Well, forget it, ask for flowers and evaluation votes first. Hey. In the evening, Natasha Romanoff pressed him on the seat and turned it into a human-shaped cushion. He also called it to guide people like Yi Yu who are strong, rich, and well-connected, as well as people with super ability, so as to prevent them from going astray. While playing the game wantonly, he told his previous stories. It made Yi Yu look at the tent in a daze. Well, it's really hard to spend an afternoon without electronic devices. Yi Yu now knows why electricity is one of the greatest inventions of mankind. Little villains. Natasha Romanoff rolled her eyes at Yi Yu, then sat up, stretched her waist, then looked at Yi Yu and said, "I'll tell you the tragic story before. This is to guide you and prevent you from walking on my path." Old Lou, I didn't expect you, a little villain, to have an impure mind.
God.
Hearing the widow's words, Yu couldn't help covering his head and said in a helpless voice, "First of all, this is a normal human emotion. Second, performing in a circus, you don't think this so-called previous job is it too much? Please, that was Clint Barton's childhood experience. You can't arrange other people's stories on your own just to rely on the self-heating mat for a while."
Oh,
Looking at the speechless Yu, Natasha Romanoff suddenly became curious. "How do you know this happened when Barton was a kid?" With beautiful eyes wandering, the game console in his hand that had run out of battery was casually thrown aside, and he returned to the position just now very skillfully. Then he raised his head, looked at Yu and asked curiously, "Do you still know that Barton was a child when he was a child, Tusk Tusk? Tell me, what exactly is your ability? Or you can not only know some future things but also see other people's past."
I know a lot.
Seeing this widow sister who seemed light but actually leaned on her body like a puddle of flesh, Yu put his head on the table behind him and then gradually said, "I don't know any of your past, nor I don't want to know. After all, everyone's past has an unbearable past. Maybe in the dead of night, or regret, or resentment, or cry bitterly, but this is life.
Why are you pretending to be deep?
Seeing Yu's sighing face, the widow raised her hand and pinched Yu's arm, and then said, "You are just 19 years old and you are still a good age. Why pretend to be deep? This is not your age. What should be done?" I ignored the ridicule of the widow sister, but when I think about it carefully, it seems that the superheroes of the Marvel movie universe seem to either have a tragic past, or the ending is not very good. Hawkeye Barton wandered around as a child and performed in a circus. In the future, his family will be wiped out and he will become a Ronin. Finally, the family was reunited, but the dearest partner sacrificed for Soul Gem. STEVE Chinese letter captain a MERIC a Chinese letter Chinese letter. Chinese letter 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 Chinese letter. The friend Bucky was brainwashed by the Hydra people and staged a show of falling in love and killing each other. Fortunately, the final ending is to go back to the past and grow old with my beloved. Tony, this guy, always thought he didn't have fatherly love, so he longed for it, but he was so arrogant that he didn't show it. After returning to the past, he found that his father loved him so much, but he fell out because the person who killed his parents was a friend of Captain America. 2-1. In the end, he became the one who snapped his fingers, deceived the tears of countless audiences. Widow, Wanda, Pietro, Dr. Banner, to say nothing. Think about it carefully, it seems that the superheroes of Avengers have all experienced the pain of large file size and small size. Thinking of this, Yu nodded thoughtfully. I seem to be the best one. No, I'm not a superhero, so why join in the fun? Wouldn't it be nice to just make money, write books, and wait for Wanda to grow up? To save the world, let the Avengers do it. Own. Well, I will definitely mobilize all the people in the newspapers under my banner to applaud them, and when necessary, I will personally write an article for them. Hiss. Thinking about it this way, it seems pretty good. Looking at Yu, who was lost in thoughts, Natasha Romanoff didn't care, but quietly thought about how to report to that guy Nick Fury after going back. Well, no matter what, just report half of the ability of the stinky guy in front of him. As for the fact that he can see the future, it is absolutely impossible to say. After all, Nick Fury likes to doubt everything too much. If he knows that Yu has the ability to see the future inadvertently, then I am afraid that strengthening the monitoring is already the best result. In case this guy Nick Fury gets a twitch, he's going to arrest Yu and lock him up in SHIELD, making him describe what's going to happen in the future every day. I am afraid that according to the personality of this seemingly elegant and easygoing guy in front of him, but he is actually very proud, then there may be big troubles. Once things happen, many people are destined to die. Maybe in the future there will be one less person who is destined to become a superhero, and one more powerful super criminal. At least now is not the time to expose Yu ability. Such a good young man, I must not let him go his own way. The widow didn't realize it at all, and she had only been in contact with Yu for a few days in the desert, and it seemed that something was wrong with her mentality. She is more lazy and casual and doesn't care much about the specific content of the task, and now she can do whatever she wants. This is how life should be. Definitely, it's even better if no one comes to bother you. Just like now, the widow sister really wants to take out her weapon and kill this guy who suddenly appeared. Seeing this guy who walked into the tent with a confused expression on his face, the widow stood up helplessly, and then said to Yi Yu while assembling the sniper weapon, "It seems that the life that can be leisured for a few days is coming to an end." Ignoring the widow's complaints, Yi Yu looked at the guy in front of him who was controlled by his mental power, and then asked, "Tony has installed the energy response device."
Yes, Mr. Yi.
The middle-aged man with a confused expression in his eyes nodded and said, "Mr. Tony Stark in the cave has already taken off the battery used for life extension and replaced it with a blue glowing thing."
I see.
Yi Yu nodded and then said, "Go back and tell Tony, let him stay in the cave tonight and don't come out when he hears any noise outside until I go to pick him up."
Yes, Mr. Yi.
The guy under control nodded and then walked outside. Seeing Yi Yu, who had stood up and was exercising his muscles, the widow sister asked with concern, "Are you sure you don't want me to accompany you? You must know that maybe I am more skilled in fighting than you. I need you to help me stay at a high place and snipe those who want to escape or attack me secretly. To be honest, this is my first time fighting, and there will always be some missing places." Yi Yu looked at the widow sister and then said, "No problem." Natasha Romanoff nodded and then pulled the bolt of the sniper rifle and then said with a smile, "Let me see what you little guy is capable of."
God.
Speechlessly, he gave Sister Widow a glance, and Yi Yu opened the tent and walked out directly. Under the moonlight, the cold wind blows. Yi Yu, who was dressed in black, seemed to have merged into the night at this moment. In the valley, those who attacked Tony's convoy were gathering together in twos and threes at the moment, warming themselves by the bonfire. Although they had been living here all the time, the cold in the desert night was something people couldn't get used to. Having reached the highest point, the widow's sister, who was aiming at the people in the valley with a sniper scope, smiled at Yi Yu through a wireless headset and said, "I'm already in place, Busy Kang, let's start your performance." At the edge of the valley, upon hearing what the widow said, Yi Yu gave a thumbs up in her direction, and then smiled through the earphones. "Then, please enjoy the next performance, and hope that we can satisfy our beautiful Miss Natasha Romanoff." While speaking, Yi Yu stretched out his hand, and a tang knife instantly appeared in Yi Yu's hand in the system space. Holding a tang knife in his hand, stepping on the moonlight, Yi Yu fearlessly walked towards the valley, those who were warming up by the fire. Under the starlight in the gaze, the aura is unrivaled. The blade of the long knife cut across the sand and stone, and there was a rustling sound. The people who found Yi Yu most leisurely were the few people on the outer layer leaning on the bonfire to keep warm. After these people found Yi Yu, they immediately stood up, raised their weapons, and shouted at Yi Yu. It's just that the language is so messed up that Yi Yu couldn't understand what they were saying at all. Seeing that Yi Yu didn't stop, but walked towards them fearlessly under the pointer of the weapon. With every step, Yi Yu's aura increased, and every step seemed to be able to make the hearts of these people tremble. The person who spoke at the beginning looked at Yi Yu, who was dressed in black like a ghost, and his fear gradually arose. He couldn't bear it anymore. He raised his weapon and was ready to attack Yi Yu. But at the next moment, the companion who had made the same movement as him, under the gaze of Yi Yu, immediately held the weapon and pulled the trigger at the companion beside him. All of a sudden, the outermost layer of gunfire rang out. The next moment, the people in the valley who were leaning on the bonfire to keep warm also stood up, stared at each other, and ran out of the valley with their weapons, wanting to see what happened. However, before they could go out, they saw a figure jumping down from the sky in an instant, and then landed in front of them. Seeing Yi Yu suddenly appearing, everyone was startled. Just as they were about to raise their weapons to attack, they saw a cold light flash in Yi Yu's eyes, and then he rushed directly into the crowd like a leopard. At this moment, the tang dao in Yi Yu's hand is like Death God's Reaper. Every time he swung the sword, a piece of blood would be splattered, and every time he swung the sword, a life would be harvested. After seeing this scene, many people raised their weapons and attacked Yi Yu, but just as the bullets flew towards Yi Yu, who was carrying a tang knife, raised his hand instantly, and psychokinesis instantly formed a barrier in front of Yi Yu. After the bullet attack hit the psychokinesis barrier, it left only a ripple, and then fell to the ground with a crisp sound. More people were under the interference of Yi Yu's mental power and started shooting at the people around them with their weapons. It seems that these companions who were around in the past are now enemies with deep hatred. Above the valley, watching Yi Yu jump into the crowd through the sniper scope and start attacking, he was still sweating for Yi Yu. After all, this was his first fight. But the results in front of her surprised Natasha Romanoff. How does Yi Yu at this moment look like someone who participated in a battle for the first time? This is clearly like a person who has a very high combat awareness and also has a very powerful mental interference ability. It can make enemies kill each other, and even more so it can use that opaque thing to block the enemy's flying bullets. Only, what is that layer of opaque enchantment? Could it be that this is another ability of Yu in the cave, throwing the car battery aside, looking at the blue light energy reactor on his body? Tony Stark raised his eyebrows proudly and said to Ethan,
Well, I just said it, I'm a genius.
regarding Tony's boast, Ethan didn't complain but simply gave a thumbs up. After all, whether Tony Stark is a genius or not, the whole world has a consensus. Just when Tony Stark was about to continue to say something, suddenly there was a loud noise outside, and then gunfire rang out instantly, and the screams of many people also reached the ears of the two. Hearing the screams and gunshots outside, the two looked at each other. Ethan wanted to run to the iron gate to have a look, but Tony Stark dragged him to the corner of the wall. This is the safest way. Now is not the time to watch the excitement, man, bullets, and no eyes. Tony looked at Ethan and said. Pushing his glasses, Ethan looked towards the iron gate and then asked curiously, is your friend here?
Should be.
Tony Stark nodded, but the excitement in his eyes betrayed his calm expression at the moment. Seeing the excitement in Tony Stark's eyes, Ethan said enviously, I really envy you for having such a friend who will come to rescue you as soon as possible when you are in danger.
Haha, it's nothing.
Some proud emotions flashed across Tony Stark's face, and then he said softly, I don't have any friends except for Pepper Happy, only Yi and Rhodes are the only friends I can trust. If it were Yi who was kidnapped, I would use all my strength to rescue him.
This is what friends should do, isn't it?
Looking at the proud Tony Stark in his tone, Ethan nodded sadly as if he had thought of something and said, maybe. Outside, behind the barrier of psychokinesis, the bullets had no effect on Yi Yu. Coupled with the interference of mental power, the group of people killed each other, and almost in a short time, dozens of guys all fell to the ground and became corpses one after another. After finishing solving these people, Yi Yu gave a thumbs up to Natasha Romanoff at the top of the valley, indicating that they had been solved, and then walked into the cave. I just walked to the entrance of the cave, but I saw a bunch of weapons with Stark Industry on the other side. After thinking for a while, Yi Yu raised his hand, and a huge fireball instantly appeared in Yi Yu's hand, and then the whole fireball rushed directly towards those Stark industrial weapons.
Boom, boom.
After the fireball hit those Stark industrial weapons, a violent explosion rose into the sky, and the valley turned into a sea of flames in an instant. After seeing this scene through the sniper scope, Natasha Romanoff really didn't know what kind of expression she should have at the moment. Although I have constantly improved Yi Yu's ability in my heart, I can. She found that she still underestimated Yi Yu's true strength. The eyes are constantly moving, and the interest in her heart is even higher. At this moment, she really wants to know how powerful Yi Yu's real strength is, inside the cave. Accompanied by a violent explosion, Tony and Ethan clung tightly to the rock wall of the cave in fright. The explosion just now had shaken the whole cave, and some dust and gravel fell down. The disheveled Tony was about to say something when he suddenly heard the iron door that closed their connection with freedom and the outside world kicked open. Tony, who was cleaning the dust off his head, turned his head subconsciously and found a young man standing at the door looking at him with a smile. For some reason, after seeing this familiar guy, Tony Stark found himself agitated and his nose was a little sore. There is no way, a good experimental weapon, but was kidnapped by someone and almost died. The body can only rely on the battery of a vehicle to survive, and was threatened and tortured by others. Now, after seeing his best friend come to save him, the situation that he thought he would die, the emotion that had been suppressed for a long time finally broke out. He took several deep breaths, barely suppressing the erupting emotions in his heart. Only then did Tony Stark step forward, raised his hand and punched Yu, but still said arrogantly, "Who told you to come and save me? I'm starting from the dignified Tony Stark, the greatest man of the 21st century, inventor, a famous genius. Even without you coming to save me, I can escape." Yu burst out laughing, seeing the incomparable arrogance in his words, but the unconcealable emotion in his eyes. He hugged Tony Stark, gave him 2 hard hammers, and then said with a smile, definitely, our Tony is a genius. How can we lock him up in a small cave? It's definitely, there's no doubt about it. Tony Stark nodded vigorously, then hugged Yu's back tightly with both hands and hammered hard twice at the same time. It seems that the emotions that have been suppressed for a long time in my heart have finally dissipated at this moment. After a while, Tony Stark looked at Yu. A smile flashed in his eyes, although his tone was very light but very sincere.
Thanks, my buddy.
Quinjet Fighter let him sleep more. Looking at Tony Stark, who was sleeping soundly on the seat, Yu smiled and said to Natasha Romanoff, "During this period, Tony Stark has not slept peacefully for a long time, and his spirit has been highly tense, so after being rescued by Yu, his spirit relaxed. After he survived all the way, he boarded the plane, directly fell asleep. As for Ethan beside Tony Stark, he was also squinting at the moment, but the movement of his eyeballs proved that he was not actually asleep. I don't know what he was thinking. In the movie, he helped Tony with his life, let him know what responsibility is, and it was the first time that Tony Stark had a sense of responsibility. But now, Ethan is still alive, but he doesn't know what he will do next. But Tony Stark should be able to settle it. After setting up the autopilot, Natasha Romanoff put her legs on the dashboard, looked at Yu and smiled and said, "What are you going to do when you go back this time?"
Right?
Hearing the widow's question, Yu thought for a while, then smiled and said, "It's still the same as before, what I did before and what I will do in the future. Life, in fact, has not changed that much. Besides, I really like my life now."
Right.
Hearing what Yu said, the widow nodded lightly and said, "Don't worry, Nick Fury, I'll help you cover it up. It's best not to expose your ability easily because you're afraid of causing trouble, some confusion. Secondly, it will also make some people with ulterior motives interested in you. At least this will interfere with you and want to live an ordinary life. As for SHIELD, leave it to me. More importantly, the more people know about a person's whole cards, the more thoroughly they will be studied. The more confusing people are, the greater the winning rate." Looking at Yu, Natasha Romanoff said very seriously, "I once dealt with a guy named Anthony. He was very good at imitating other people's fights, which guy said that he was a super criminal. But in the end he started a school, definitely, was wiped out by SHIELD. He himself is nowhere to be found. However, I agree with one thing he said, that is, people with more cards in their holes will live longer." Widow sister looked at Yu and said very seriously. Listening to the widow's words, Yu nodded slightly. Running a school, super criminal, good at impersonation. Isn't that imitating the master? After the plane flew steadily in the air for more than 2 hours, Tony Stark, who was sleeping, finally woke up. The first thing Tony did when he woke up was to look around, and he was relieved to find that he was really on the plane instead of dreaming. How long before we can go home?" Standing up and covering Ethan, who was gradually falling asleep, Tony came to Yu's side and asked with a smile. "According to the time and the flight speed of the Quinjet fighter, it will take about 7 hours. Yu left the co-pilot, then sat beside Tony and smiled. "What do you want to do most now?" "Eat 2 cheeseburgers while Pepper babbles, then lay in my bed and sleep soundly to JARVIS. Tony Stark shrugged his shoulders, then looked at Yu and laughed. "But seriously, buddy, how do you know that I'm going to be kidnapped? If you had seen the USB flash drive I sent you, you wouldn't have asked this question." Hearing Tony's curiosity, Yu replied, "U-Disc. That's not a great detective." A guy as smart as Tony Stark, halfway through his words, as if he had thought of something, he didn't say anything more. After sorting out the cause and effect of all the things, he gradually understood what was going on.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yu raised his arm and then patted it on Tony's shoulder. "But I believe this will not trouble you. After all, you are Tony Stark, aren't you?" Tony, who was silent for a while, turned his head to look at Yu and then twitched his mouth. "This is ridiculous and it's really unexpected. But maybe I'm right to want to shut down the Stark Industrial Weapons Manufacturing Department. These days in the cave, I have been thinking about how many people have been hurt by the weapons I made. Wanda, Pietro, those poor civilians, and even myself." Tony patted the power reactor lightly, then smiled wryly. "If you don't make a weapon, don't do it. According to your genius idea, Stark won't go out of business with you." Yu looked at Tony and then guided with a smile. "But I think you should make some prosthetic limbs to protect you and Peppo. After all, a mortal body can never resist cold steel, can it? In fact, it is really interesting to see 2 arrogant people get together. Just like now, when the Quinjet fighter jets arrived in Manhattan, the sky had already brightened. Peppo, who came to pick him up, looked at Tony with red eyes. Well, if you give him some time, he can deal with those enemies and escape by himself without saving Bala Bala at all." The other one, with red eyes but stubborn mouth, said that his eyes were red and swollen because he didn't sleep well last night, and he wasn't worried about the boss or anything. Watching the conversation between the 2 arrogant people, Yu suddenly felt a toothache. So with Pebo's thanks, Yu drove the car alone towards his villa. That's right, being alone. After the plane landed, Natasha Romanoff was ready to go back to SHIELD after all. For something as big as Tony Stark, you have to report to Nick Fury. So after everything had been told to Nick Fury was silent for several minutes. He always felt that Natasha Romanoff was hiding something from him, but he couldn't tell what it was. However, Nick Fury, who has always been cautious, asked again. You mean, you sent Tony Stark a USB flash drive ahead of time, and the contents of the USB flash drive were Obadiah Stan's weapons that Obadiah Stan secretly sold Stark Industries from other channels. And he also wanted to deal with Tony Stark.
Bad idea.
So after you found out that Tony Stark didn't take it seriously, he was a little uncertain whether Obadiah Stane would do something to Tony, and it happened that at this time, you were by his side as an SHIELD agent, so he just take you there, help if there is danger, if there is no danger, just treat it as a distraction.
That's right, that's the way things are. Natasha Romanoff spread her hands, then said with a smile, any questions? Too much a coincidence.
Nick Fury shook his head lightly and then asked, then, the reason why you didn't rescue Tony Stark immediately is that he was seriously injured and needs to develop an energy reactor to ensure that the heart will not be concentrated by shrapnel.
So how did you save him in the end? Isn't this simple?
Natasha Romanoff spread her hands and said, a group of outrageous guys who have not received training and even have low combat effectiveness are really too simple for me.
All right.
Nick Fury nodded. Although he knew that Natasha Romanoff was hiding something intentionally, he didn't pursue it further. He knew one thing, that is, Natasha Romanoff would not betray SHIELD, and that was enough. As for the others, everyone can have their own considerations, can't they?
Tell me about you.
Nick Fury looked at Natasha Romanoff, then put down the pen in his hand and asked very seriously, I've been by his side these days, what kind of person do you think he is? He has ability, love, and kindness. Although he is peaceful, he is very proud and has a sense of responsibility. Although he is only 19 years old, he is very mature. This may be related to the fact that he has always been alone. Anyway, after working as an agent for so many years, I found the color of sunshine in him.
High recommendations.
Hearing Natasha Romanoff's words, Nick Fury looked at Natasha Romanoff tentatively and asked, since he is a good person, and what do you think, does he have the qualifications to become SHIELD?
I object.
Before Nick Fury could finish speaking tentatively, Natasha Romanoff immediately shook her head and said firmly,
I object to pulling him into SHIELD.
Give me a reason, after all, his strength is good, and according to what you said, he has great potential.
Nick Fury asked very seriously.
Natasha Romanoff did not answer Nick Fury directly, but leaned on the chair, flashed a flash of memory and said, Nick, do you know the smell of sunshine? It is so pure, fresh, and makes people feel very warm and warm. It seems to be able to drive away all negative emotions and let people see all the beauty in the world.
He is such a person.
Natasha Romanoff's voice is soft, but with a hint of firmness. I haven't been in contact with him for a long time, but he has a lot of great potential in him. I don't deny that if he can join SHIELD, then for SHIELD great help.
But what kind of people are we, do I need to say more?
As she spoke, the widow smiled self-deprecatingly. Every one of us has blood on our hands. Some are enemies, some are our own, some are bad, and some are good. I don't want him to become like us. In fact, he should live in the sun. He deserves such beauty.
You can always see the light of humanity in him.
Kindness, integrity, compassion, friendliness, loyalty to friends, love to family. It seems that all good words are suitable for him. Saying that, Natasha Romanoff looked up, looked at Nick Fury and laughed very seriously. He reminds me of a person, Steve Rogers, the legend who passed away. I think if he and Steve change their identities, then he leaves definitely going to do what Steve did. So if such a person joins our SHIELD and does what we do, you should know what will happen. We people can't live in the light, blood, killing, intrigue. These will always be with us in our life. This is our life.
Not his.
He deserves better, not like us. Let's just leave him with the light. With that said, Natasha Romanoff stood up and walked outside. However, when he walked to the door of the office, he turned his head and said softly, maybe there won't be one more superhero in this world, but at least there will be one more kind person in this world. Someone I can trust. Looking at Natasha Romanoff, who turned away without turning her head after finishing speaking, Nick Fury was only slightly silent for a while. Then in the drawer, a document appeared in Nick Fury's hands. Looking at the name on the document, Nick Fury seemed to have confirmed his opinion even more. This is, a long time ago, he always wanted to form a team. That was an idea that sprouted in his heart when the woman left the Earth. Maybe. The first opportunity has appeared. Tony Stark is located in a villa on a cliff by the sea. You should be resting now, not watching videos. Peppo came in with a cup of hot milk, put the hot milk in front of Tony, and sat beside him and said softly, I'm looking at the USB flash drive that you sent me some time ago. Tony picked up the milk that Peppo handed over, took a sip, and said in a low voice, Peppo, tell me, why are people always so greedy? Who? Peppo looked at Tony puzzled and asked, I don't quite understand. Well, nothing. Tony Stark shook his head, just about to say something. He opened his mouth, but found that he had nothing to say at all. With a deep sigh, Tony Stark closed the notebook in front of him, then leaned on the sofa, staring at the ceiling above, his chaotic thoughts constantly drifting. After a long while, he opened his mouth and said, After my father passed away, I regarded him as my relative. In fact, he did the same. At least before this, he has been taking care of me. No matter what I do, he will support me with a smile. Even if I don't manage Stark Industry, he will watch for me. That's how it should be. Listening to Tony Stark talking to himself, Peppo frowned slightly. You mean Obadiah? Actually, after Wanda's poor siblings appeared, I discovered that someone was hiding Stark Industries weapons and selling Stark Industries weapons through other channels. I was looking into this matter for a while, but whenever I found some clues, they were always cut off. For this reason, I even told him. He smiled and told me that it would be better for him to deal with such things that hurt Stark Industry. I have always trusted him very much. Just like these years, I was in charge of R&D and he was in charge of the management of Stark Industry. With that said, Tony collapsed on the sofa, raised his hand to cover his eyes, looked at the light of the chandelier and entered his eyes through his fingers. To be honest, I really don't want to believe that this matter has something to do with him, but you gave me the evidence. The facts are here. Even if I don't believe it, it's useless. Why did he do this? Do? Sitting up from the sofa with a grunt, Tony Stark looked at Peppo with solemn eyes. I don't understand why he would do this. In the past few decades in Stark Industry, doesn't he make a lot of money? You must know that Stark Industry also has his shares, and he already pays a lot of dividends every year. He is no longer short of money. He doesn't need to do this at all. What's more, I trust him so much, but he wants. Speaking of this, Tony Stark clenched his fists tightly, and after a moment of grim expression on his face, he sat down on the sofa with a slumped expression. I trust him so much that I even regard him as my uncle, but he wants to kill me. Looking at Tony, who had been betrayed by his relatives, with mixed expressions of unwillingness, despondency, and helplessness, Peppo didn't say anything, just stretched out his hand and tightly held Tony's clenched fists. Hands, then what are you going to do? Peppo looked at Tony, his eyes were full of concern. No matter what, Tony, I support you very much. I think no matter what you do, I will understand you. Lies? Tony Stark opened his mouth for a moment, but he couldn't say it cruelly. After all, he was someone who took care of him meticulously for more than 20 years, and he was regarded as his own uncle. He has always been unable to send him to prison ruthlessly. After all, since his parents passed away, Obadiah Stan has been regarded as his only relative. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Tony Stark is arrogant, but no one knows how much he longs for family affection. Especially since his father was only obsessed with research since he was a child, he thought he had never gotten real fatherly love. But since his parents passed away, the appearance of Obadiah Stine made up for Tony's lack of affection. He betrayed himself. Thinking of this, Tony Stark remained silent. After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth and said, In 3 days' time, help me hold a press conference. I want to announce 2 decisions. No problems. Peppo nodded lightly. Maybe others don't understand Tony, but Peppo knows how much he is struggling in his heart at this moment. Maybe I can't do anything, but I can still be by his side and give some insignificant comfort. Ask for flowers and evaluation votes. There will be another update in a while. Well, in addition, Tony Stark actually trusted Obadiah Stine very much in the early days, and once regarded him as his own uncle, and even handed over the operation and management of Stark Industry to in the early morning in the Manhattan Villa area. Snored. Seeing Wanda, who was holding a fork and constantly stirring the food on the plate in front of him, and adding various vegetables to the plate from time to time, Pietro felt a little helpless. Sister, can't we have a good breakfast? You will make the food terrible in a while, and I will have to eat it in the end. Also, although green vegetables are good, you can't add them all at once. Wait, don't add celery juice or the food will be bitter. Before I finished speaking, I saw Wanda pursing her lips, looking like I was very unhappy, and then added the celery juice in front of her to the milk and covered her head helplessly. Well, you don't need to think about it. After this file-sized sister is coaxed by Brother Yu, she will definitely dislike the messy food she made by herself. And then she will put the plate of things that don't seem to have any appetite at all. Stuff it in front of yourself. Then very calmly snatched away the food in front of him, After all, this is not the first time, but there is no way whoever makes himself a younger brother or an older brother will spoil Wanda. Sure enough, when Wanda, who was pouting and looking like I was wronged, saw Yu coming out of the bathroom and sitting on the dining table preparing to eat breakfast, she turned her head and looked at Yu without saying a word. There is a sparkle of bling-bling in the cute big eyes. It was filled with the appearance of my grievance. Seeing Wanda stretching out her hand to grab the corner of her clothes, acting coquettishly to herself, and being aggrieved at the same time, Yu suddenly laughed. "What's the matter, my little princess? Did someone offend you, Pietro?" Hearing that Yu threw the blame on himself again very skillfully, Pietro was speechless for a moment. Whenever this time, I am the best candidate to take the blame. But why do I still feel happy? No, how could you be happy? It must not be like this. After all, normal people will never be happy if they take the blame. Well, it's definitely not a happy feeling, and it's not because every time I take the blame, my favorite versions of Superman will appear in my room in the form of gifts. Well, I love my sister very much, so as long as my sister can be happy, everything will be fine. Definitely not limited edition sneakers, Superman toys, skateboards, and the like.
Brothers Yu.
Wanda ignored Pietro on the side but pulled Yu by the corner of his clothes, looked at Yu with a pouting face and said pitifully, "Brother Yu, can you not be with Sister Natasha Romanoff together? 2 more years, Wanda will grow up." Hearing Wanda's cuteness and cute voice, Yu suddenly laughed. "Brother Yu, why are you laughing? I'm serious." Seeing Yu laughing, Wanda immediately felt even more wronged. Yes, I am not as good-looking as Sister Natasha Romanoff, nor as beautiful as Sister Natasha Romanoff, but I am not bad either, and after waiting for 2 years I will become an adult. If I drink more milk and eat more vegetables, I can grow up. Morning, everyone. Stretching in her pajamas, Natasha Romanoff came down from the second floor, smiled and greeted everyone, and then walked towards the washroom. Seeing Natasha Romanoff, who is skilled in not treating herself as an outsider, Wanda felt even more wronged in her heart. It's all in the house. Snort, I just know to rob Yu brother with myself, woo-woo. Looking at Wanda's face full of wild thoughts, Yu laughed and raised his hand, rubbed Wanda's head lightly, and then said with a smile, "What are you thinking about?" "Natasha Romanoff is my secretary now, and it's just a superficial identity, but she's here to protect me." Yu rubbed Wanda's head dotingly, and then said in a very gentle voice, "Besides, I'm still waiting for Wanda to grow up and become your brother Yu, my bride." Hearing Yu's words, Wanda immediately raised her head. Her aggrieved face had disappeared and instantly changed into a proud and cute look. Wanda nodded vigorously and then happily said, "Then let's talk about it. Wanda will marry brother Yu since Sister Natasha Romanoff is not here to fight me."
That's good.
After receiving an affirmative answer, Wanda happily sat back in her seat. Just looking at the milk filled with celery juice and the plate filled with various vegetables in front of him, he frowned.
Well,
Seeing this scene, Pietro sighed helplessly. Before Wanda could make a move, he pushed the untouched food and milk in front of Wanda and skillfully took the glass of milk from Wanda and filled it up. Vegetable food. Seeing Pietro's actions, Wanda showed a big smile with great satisfaction, and then looked at Pietro with the expression of a good brother, and then ate the food with satisfaction. Pietro, on the other hand, glanced at Yu as if saying in his eyes, "I still want a Superman doll." Facing Pietro's gaze, Yu naturally received it. After gesturing that there was no problem, Pietro began to eat happily. This is actually not bad. In other words, a new set of models of Superman fighting the wild wolf has been launched on the market. Well, that's great. Inside the Horn newspaper office. "Boss, the latest issue of the newspaper is selling like crazy." After seeing Yu coming to the office, the editor-in-chief in charge of operations walked in excitedly with a newspaper in his hands, his eyes full of excitement. "Bring me the newspaper and let me have a look." Hearing what the editor-in-chief said, Yu took the newspaper and read it quietly. The most angry issue of the newspaper published the story of the kidnapping of Tony Stark, and even published the torture suffered by Tony Stark and his state when he returned. Using an extremely exaggerated rendering method, the whole incident was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, and the links were intertwined. Even the photos of Tony Stark getting off the plane were published. It can be said that many people care about Tony Stark's every move. After all, this is the best show after dinner. Only, Yu remembered that he didn't seem to tell what happened, so who wrote it? You must know that after Tony Stark returned home, he kept saying that he was locked at home and did not accept any interviews, so some reporters even knew that Tony Stark had returned. But if you want to interview him, you can't find anyone at all. Didn't you hear Peppo being interviewed on TV, saying that Tony Stark is very tired and needs a few days of rest? But raising his head, looking at the widow's sister who was trimming her nails with nail clippers on her legs on the table, Yi Yu suddenly understood. Presumably this soft article must have been handled by the widow. Otherwise, there would not even be photos of Tony getting off the plane and Peppo looking at each other affectionately. Thinking of this, Yi Yu put down the newspaper in his hand, then looked at the editor-in-chief in front of him and asked, "How many newspapers have you bought this issue?"
How's the response?
"Boss, we have been warming up the news about Tony Stark's return since 3 days ago. After 3 days of fermenting, this issue of the newspaper has booked 30% more than other newspapers at the same period. The number of publications this morning alone has reached an astonishing 750,000 copies. And in addition to some old customers who subscribe to our Horn Daily's annual subscription, there are more than 50,000 family annual subscriptions and more than 100,000 monthly family subscriptions. Even since 3 days ago, the hotline of the newspaper office has been non-stop. Many people want to ask about Tony Stark's kidnapping. It can be said that in this battle, our Horn newspaper office has entered the newspaper media, the top of the ranks. Even the number of people who subscribe online has increased by 30%. It can be said that our Bugle newspaper has become one of the top ranks in terms of sales, volume, and word of mouth. Looking at the excited editor-in-chief, Yi Yu nodded lightly and said, "Don't be so excited, John. Isn't this the goal of our original establishment of the newspaper?"
It's just achieved 3 years in advance. Oh yes.
Editor-in-chief John nodded, still with an incredulous look on his face. Under the impact of the internet, many paper media have all switched to operating the internet. Only our Bugle newspaper is still promoting paper-based, internet-assisted
Way of workings.
I really didn't expect that this time we actually achieved the planned goal. It can be said that the good reputation of our Horn newspaper has completely exploded this time. Tony Stark is really the lucky star of our Horn newspaper. Looking at the excited editor-in-chief John, Yi Yu smiled and said, "Okay, don't get excited, go out and tell our employees that this month's bonus will be doubled."
Go. Okay.
Hearing Yi Yu's words, John walked out with an excited expression on his face. In less than half a minute, the whole newspaper office cheered, and someone even shouted the boss hail. Hearing the excited voice outside, Yi Yu turned his head, looked at the widow who was not far from the office, looked at the unruly widow who put her feet on the table lazily, and then laughed. "I didn't expect your writing to be so good. I was taken aback when I glanced at it just now, tusk tusk. Even I, the client, feel terrified by the exaggerated atmosphere." Hearing Yi Yu's words, the widow sister stretched, put down the nail clippers in her hand and glanced at her nails with satisfaction. Then he replied, "The language is exaggerated and the words are just exaggerated. It's no big deal. After all, there are some things we can't say outside, but it's okay to extract some processes. However, I concealed your affairs. After all, I think that you don't want to reveal your identity and be regarded as a curious object by others."
That's true.
Yi Yu nodded and then said, "Natasha Romanoff, if you weren't from SHIELD, I really want you to stay in the newspaper all the time."
Aren't I right now?
The widow folded her legs and stood up, then she showed a very sweet smile. "Then boss, as your secretary, I should take good care of you, so would you like something to drink? Coffee, tea, or pure water, water?" Looking at the widow with a sweet smile on her face, Yi Yu immediately rolled her eyes. "Call yourself what you want to drink anyway. During office hours, there is a meal allowance. This is what I am most satisfied with. After all, for us women, sweets cannot be given up, even though we know that we will gain weight." The widow raised her eyebrows proudly, then picked up the phone on the table and dialed out. At the same time, because Tony Stark was attacked and kidnapped, and then rescued and returned, it attracted the attention of a large number of people. Not only the media, ordinary people, even the group of guys at the beginning of F have also set their sights on the Bugle newspaper. "Grint, take a look. The level of detail in this manuscript is exactly like the person involved." A middle-aged man in a black suit put it on the young man's table in front of him. While holding a coffee in his hand, he said, "No one knows what happened to Tony Stark from being kidnapped to being rescued. However, the moment Tony Stark was kidnapped, his secretary, Miss Pepper Potts, called us directly and asked for help. At the same time, he almost hired dozens of private investigators, plus Rhodes and the others. Your Majesty, I have been searching for news about Tony Stark with all my strength. However, a newspaper office was able to know accurate news, and even described all the details."
Don't you think this matter is suspicious?
Hearing what the middle-aged man said, the young man named Grint nodded and said, "I read this newspaper this morning, so I have an idea, that is to summon the owner of this newspaper and ask him to tell us what happened in detail, and come to assist us in our investigation."
Definitely, I also suspect that Yi Yu.
The owner of the Horn newspaper has something to do with the kidnapping of Tony Stark. Messaging. Hearing Grint's words, the middle-aged man shook his head with a smile and said, "Stop making trouble, buddy. We can only go to the door for people with his status. You must know that the existence of their status is not ours. They can be summoned at any time. Don't treat them like ordinary peoples. Let's go there in person, and remember to have a better attitude. Otherwise we may get into trouble if he calls. After all, you must know that many people in the upper class as well as those above us owe others love." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Grint stood up, put on the suit on the chair and walked outside with the middle-aged man, asking curiously, "Isn't he the owner of a newspaper? How could he have such a huge energy? Why do you think he started a newspaper?" The middle-aged man laughed when he heard the words and then explained, "Do you know how much he is worth now? At least a few billion. In fact, with his worth, there is no need to start a newspaper at all. After all, what a newspaper can earn him in a year is not as good as what his best-selling books can bring him in a month." The reason why he founded the newspaper and established the Bugle newspaper to the top 3 in terms of circulation in 2 years is that he wanted the media to be his mouthpiece. In the past 2 years, although the Bugle News claimed to uphold the slogan of fairness, impartiality, uncovering the truth of the submerged matter, and allowing all ordinary people to have the right to know, in fact, if the information in his hands is fully disclosed, it will inevitably trigger a crisis. Big earthquake. Speaking of which, the middle-aged man opened the car door and sat in, then smiled disdainfully at the young co-pilot. This is also the reason why, in just 2 years, his contacts are very extensive. After all, many people are grateful to him, and even our superiors owe him favors. Don't forget that he was the first to have all the evidence in the FBI incident that was raging a year ago, but he didn't. People who have made it public. Our superiors are grateful to him for this alone. Otherwise, the pressure from the fishing boat a year ago is beyond your imagination. Maybe a lot of people will be involved." After finishing speaking, the middle-aged man started the car and drove directly in the direction of the Horn newspaper office. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Grint was silent for a while, turned his head to look at the receding street scene, pondered for a moment, and then said, "That is to say, the reason why you, the founder of Bugle newspaper, wanted to create this. The bigger reason for newspapers is personal connections. Instead of wanting to make a profit." "I see." The middle-aged man sneered. After having contacts, is interest still important? According to the contacts he has now and those who are grateful to him, as long as he wants to make money, there are almost many roads in front of him. Already. So this time, I don't doubt that he has something to do with the kidnapping of Tony Stark. The reason why I want to take you there is just a formality. Otherwise, many people will say that we are eating and not working. Speaking of this middle-aged man who has seen through many things also showed a smile on his face. Actually, what we want is just to go through a scene, and then the Bugle newspaper will mention us a little bit so that we can have some credibility. That's it. After all, whether it's him or Tony Stark, no one of us can afford to offend someone in the upper class. Don't take our power too seriously. You know the world isn't just black and white. Ask for evaluation votes, 179 evaluation votes. It has not moved for several days. Brothers and sisters, please give me some. At least 200 copies will be passed. Woohoo! Inside the Horn newspaper office, accompanied by the sound of the game, Matthew looked at Yu helplessly. Although he couldn't see anything with his eyes, in fact, his inspiration was still very keen. At least, he could feel that Natasha Romanoff, whose identity he noticed was not simple, was playing games with her tablet on her legs crossed at the moment. And he looked at Yu. "I have already told you that she is not a simple person. Why are you still by my side? Aren't you afraid of causing unnecessary trouble?" Grint and the middle-aged man who started with F sitting on the side were holding tea and drinking gently. "It's really good tea. At least our tea is much worse than your tea." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Yu smiled softly. "If Mr. John likes to drink tea, then you might as well take some back when you leave." "No, if we take it back, people will criticize it. Maybe they will say that we are corrupt." "It's Mr. Yi." Upon hearing Yu's words, the young Grint spoke immediately, but before he could finish speaking, he was stopped by the middle-aged man who came with him. "Haha, Mr. Yi, don't be surprised. Grint has just joined F and Bai for less than half a year, so he still doesn't understand the rules." Hearing what the middle-aged man John said, Yu nodded lightly and said, "It's okay, the newcomers don't understand the rules, just go back and teach them. Young people, you have to experience more things. Maybe in this way, you will understand what is the real world, isn't it?" "You are right." John nodded with a smile. Actually, we came here this time to discuss the kidnapping of Mr. Stark. After all, your Bugle newspaper was the first to disclose this incident, and the incident was very detailed. So let's come and ask. Definitely, we have no other intentions. After all, these are the resources obtained by your reporters risking their lives. But after all, our identities are here, so naturally we have to go through the motions. Do you think so? Seeing the smile on John's face, Yu nodded and said, definitely, only if everyone understands each other can the world be more peaceful. This is your duty, so I will cooperate. If you have any questions, our Mr. Matthew, the legal department of the newspaper, will tell you. Thanks. Seeing you being so reasonable, John suddenly laughed. Actually, there is nothing that needs to be known, after all. It has been written in such detail in the newspaper. So we're just going through the motions, so we won't bother you, Mr. Yi. Okay, Matthew, help me send 2 agents, and help John prepare some tea. Yi looked at Matthew and gave an order and then didn't get up, just thinking about John and smiling. By the way, say hello to your team leader for me. Tell him there are almost 50 people, don't work so hard. When the time comes, I will give him something so that he can walk up. At least when the time comes to retire, according to the position and credit, you can get more. No problem, Mr. Yi, I will bring your words to you. John stood up, nodded with a smile, and walked out of the office under the leadership of Matthew. From the time they arrived at the newspaper Yi's office to the time they left, it took only about 20 minutes. And for more than 20 minutes, they didn't talk about Tony Stark's kidnapping at all. It was just like a normal reminiscence. There is no plot in the movie where the sword is on the verge of attack and then all kinds of face slapping. After Matthew sent the 2 of them away, the widow put down the tablet in her hand, looked at Yu carefully, and then shook her head constantly. Eating too much dessert toothache. Looking at Natasha Romanoff, who was clutching her cheek and shaking her head, Yu asked with a smile. That's not true. The widow looked at Yu with a look of surprise in her beautiful eyes. I thought that when these 2 guys came over, I would still need to reveal my identity as Schild. I didn't expect things to develop like this. But having said that, you really don't look like a 19-year-old youth. With this emotional intelligence and network, you look like a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s, even better than some middle-aged men. I can't even imagine that people like them will give you face and don't want to offend you easily. Hearing what the widow said, Yu leaned on the soft chair and said with a smile, why do you think I established this Bugle newspaper? Maybe intelligence, combat, investigation, etc. Natasha Romanoff, you are a professional. However, old lady, you still need to pay more attention to the things played in the upper-class world. This world is not only black and white, sometimes it also pays attention to relationships. Single people often die the fastest. A year ago, the superiors of those 2 guys got into a huge dispute, and I settled it with just a phone call and a story, so that's why I started the Bugle. Otherwise, the New York media, which has always been xenophobic, would let an outsider, the Bugle News, survive. Jin Bin, the villain in your eyes, has already helped me deal with a lot of things. While speaking, Yiyu's cell phone vibrated. He casually picked up the cell phone and glanced at it and found that his account suddenly had 5 billion more. Seeing the sudden extra 5 billion, Yiyu was stunned for a moment. What is the situation? Looking at his account, there was suddenly 5 billion more funds. Yiyu immediately turned on the computer in front of him and began to check the transfer records. Did something happen? Seeing Yiyu's actions, Natasha Romanoff also put down the game console in her hand at the moment and then asked, someone transferred 5 billion to me, I'm checking what's going on. Yiyu said it concisely. Walter. Hearing Yiyu's words, Natasha Romanoff was a little stunned. Someone somehow transferred 5 billion funds to Yiyu's account. Thinking of this, Natasha Romanoff immediately thought of a question. Could someone be trying to frame you? It's no wonder that the widow thinks so. In fact, she has seen too many things that were framed by splashing dirty water over the years of her career as a SHIELD agent. Tell me the account that transferred the money to you. Natasha Romanoff picked up the phone, and while preparing to make a call, she said to Yi very seriously, I'm going to use my power, Yi. If you don't handle this matter well, it will deal a big blow to you. The damage to reputation is probably secondary. The most fearful thing is the actions taken by some people with ulterior motives. Believe me, I have seen too many such things in these years. According to your current status, since someone can transfer money into your account, it means that the other party must be able to guess your next move. Leave it to me, I will let that person with ulterior motives know what the price is. While talking, Natasha Romanoff's eyes showed a cold light. At the moment, she has thought of many ways to solve this matter. And the consequences of these methods will make the other party feel trapped. Looking at the solemn Natasha Romanoff, Yu shook his head lightly. I can't find the other party's account, it's anonymous. Unless I use some power otherwise. As soon as the voice fell, Yu's cell phone rang again. The caller was none other than Tony Stark, who was staying at home at the moment and was researching the prosthetic limb that Yu called, but it was actually Tony Stark from the armor. Looking at the owner of the call, Yu's face immediately relaxed. I think I already know what's going on. Take it easy, Natasha Romanoff. Yu smiled and said something to the widow's sister and then picked up the phone. As soon as the call was connected, I heard the voice of Tony Stark laughing on the opposite side. How about it, my buddy? Were you shocked just now? Haha. Hearing the laughing voice of Tony Stark on the other end of the phone, the widow immediately rolled her eyes and then walked back to her seat. Are all of you rich people so boring? It made me nervous for nothing just now, and I was even ready to take some unconventional measures. Listening to the widow's sister's speechless complaints, what Yu could say was to shrug his shoulders with a smile. But he still joked to Tony Stark on the other end of the phone. Wow, I was shocked. But buddy, is this 5 billion rewards for you to thank me for saving my life? Well, I accept it with peace of mind. Down. Hearing Yu's ridicule, Tony Stark, who was laughing on the other end of the phone, coughed violently and Peppo rolled his eyes speechlessly. You people are really naive. You deserve it. Pebo said speechlessly. Just now Tony Stark wanted to play a prank on Yu, but unexpectedly he was defeated by Yu instead. Seeing Tony Stark's face turn dark, Pepper gloated. Although the words were full of schadenfreude, he still took away the coffee that Tony Stark choked on very intimately, and picked up a rag to wipe up the spilled coffee in front of him. It seems that this has become a habit for so many years. Making an apologetic gesture to Peppo, Tony Stark said to Yu on the other end of the phone with a speechless expression. Please man, what are you kidding? That's $5 billion. Well, although my life is far beyond 5 billion, but it depends on the relationship between me and you these years. I think it would be enough for me to treat you to a dinner. At most, I can open a bottle of good wine from 20 years old. Well, I'd better keep the bottle from 50 years old for myself. Get out. Listening to Tony's stingy tasing, Yu said speechlessly. Tell me, what do you want to do again? 5 billion funds, how do you want to play this time? It's very simple. Hearing Yu's question, Tony Stark put away his smile and put on a very serious expression. To be honest, buddy, I don't have many friends, so there are only 2 or 3 people I can trust. And among them, the only person who can help me do this without being discovered is you, yes. For my friend's sake, do me a favor. If Tony Stark wants to completely control Stark Industries, he must have enough shares. Although the current Stark Industries has always had the surname Stark, don't forget that the shareholders of Stark Industries are not only aware of Tony. Tony may have a lot of shares in Stark Industries, but there is absolutely no more than 40%. And the other 60%, except for some scattered small shareholders, are basically controlled by Obadiah Stine. Board members inside. This is why in the movie, Obadiah Stine was able to unite with other members of the board of directors to let Tony Stark go home to rest. Perhaps according to Tony's personality in the past, as long as the shares he owns have dividends, he can speak in Stark Industries. After all, he prefers to do some research rather than run a company, which is why Stark Industries has always been practical. In charge for Obadiah Stine's sake. After all, it was one thing to trust Obadiah, and most importantly, running Stark Industries was troublesome. How could a guy like Tony make such trouble for himself? If you have that time, you might as well enjoy your life and study some interesting inventions. But it is different now. After he was kidnapped and returned, Obadiah Stine came to see him several times, hoping that he would show up. After all, the stock of Stark Industries has been unstable since Tony was kidnapped. He hoped that Tony would show up to stabilize Stark Industries' stock. After all, Tony wasn't dead, was he? Although Obadiah also hated that group of guys for not being able to accomplish anything. But since they are not dead, there is still value in using them. But if at the very beginning, Tony Stark trusted Obadiah very much and was willing to let him take charge of Stark Industries for him, but now, after looking at the evidence, even though I still want to give this person I once regarded as a relative a chance. But some things, since they happened, will always create a gap in my heart. At least Obadiah Stine is no longer in charge of Stark Industries. In addition, after Tony came back, in addition to studying the Mark series armor, he also wanted to close the weapon manufacturing department. It is conceivable that once the weapons manufacturing department is closed, the stock of Stark Industries will drop rapidly. Perhaps, this is an opportunity for him to regain control of Stark Industries. After looking at the trustworthy people around her, Peppo definitely couldn't do it. Once she made any moves, Obadiah would definitely find out. Rhodes, he couldn't do it anymore after all. Where is his identity? Isn't it obvious to tell others that this is a button made by himself? Then the only person who can make me trust and live up to my entrustment is Yi Yu. After hanging up the phone, Yi Yu sat on a chair, watched the news of Tony Stark's return on the computer screen in front of him, and remained silent for a long time. Perhaps from the moment I came to this world, the trajectory of this movie universe has changed. In the movie, Tony Stark would never have thought of so much. What's more, even though Pepper was asked to help him manage the Stark industry, Tony has changed a lot in terms of shares and mentality. Definitely, this is changing for the better, but if this is the case, will it still be like the development plot in the movie in the future? What's wrong? Natasha Romanoff saw Yi Yu fell silent and then stepped forward to ask. It's okay, it's just a little emotional. Yi Yu smiled and shook his head. That's right. He has already come to this world. If there are no changes, then wouldn't it be for nothing? Perhaps from the first second I appeared in this world, I was doomed that things in the future would be different from the plot in the movie. Perhaps I am the turning point of this world. As for the purple sweet potato essence, it's still too early. Wait, tomorrow you will see a very huge amounts of news, enough to make everyone shocked, speechless, and disappointed. Well, maybe some people, such as Justin Hammer, will be happy. However, Tony has really matured a bit, and he has a lot more things to think about. Hearing Yi Yu's words, Natasha Romanoff suddenly had a strange expression on her face. Seemingly, Tony Stark is old enough to be Yi Yu's father. But why does it always feel that, according to Yi Yu, Tony Stark always needs to be taken care of by him? But when you think about it carefully, it seems that when these two guys are together, it is not obvious that Yi Yu is only 19 years old, and he is more like a very mature adult. As for Tony Stark, it also makes people ignore his age. Not to mention, whether these two people are together sometimes like wearing a pair of pants, or they complain about each other in a blink of an eye and use childish actions to dig holes for each other. Seemingly, they're a pretty good match. Few, it is very harmonious. There are so many things today, a lot of things. Alas, sad people, early the next morning, the Stark Industry press release was crowded with many reporters. Countless cameras are set up here, and many media are broadcasting the press conference live. That's right, this is what Stark Industries announced. Today, Tony Stark will have a very important decision to announce. Although it is said that it will start in more than 10 minutes, the venue is now full of all the reporters and media. And some media don't even have seats, so they can only stand in the back row. No way, Tony Stark was already a highly topical figure, not to mention that this was his first press conference after he was kidnapped, and everyone wanted to know what he wanted to say. Sitting in the front row of the reporter of the Horn newspaper, Gu Pan Zixing looked at the media behind him with a look of complacency on his face. What BBC, what NCI, aren't they ranked behind Lao Tzu? That's why our boss has a good relationship with Tony Stark. Backstage at a press conference, Tony was watching with a note, while Peppo was constantly helping Tony organize his clothes and makeup. Don't tell me, Pebo, this fellow Yi deserves to be the person who wrote so many best-selling books and founded the Bugle newspaper. This writing style, this compassionate feeling, tusk. I'm a little moved by what I wrote. Hearing Tony's words, Pebo said with a speechless expression, I know what you and Yi Yu are thinking. It can be said that as long as the two of you are together, there will be troubles. There is no good person. However, you'd better pay attention. Yi Yu is a very upright person in his bones. Don't let him be spoiled. Hearing what Peppo said, Tony took a deep breath with a toothache. What do you mean I shouldn't bring him down? Busy Kang, I'm also a good. Don't think I don't know, the last time you went to those Hollywood actresses, you finally pushed the matter to Yi Yu. Pepper mercilessly exposed Tony Stark's face. Misunderstanding. This is a complete misunderstanding. Tony shrugged his shoulders and said, they took the initiative to ask me out back then, not to mention the last time. Okay, I'm just your secretary and assistant, I don't care about your life. When this matter was mentioned, for some reason, Peppo always felt a little angry, although he knew that it was unreasonable for him to say so. After all, he was just his boss. But I don't know why, but I just feel a little uncomfortable. Hearing Peppo's very blunt tone, Tony raised his brows and stopped talking. He knew Peppo well, and the more he talked to her at this time, the angrier she would be. As long as she doesn't talk anymore, she will calm down in a few minutes. Sure enough, within a few minutes, Peppo's tone returned to normal again. Memorize the speech carefully. After all, although this speech will cause the stock price of Stark Industries to fall all the way, at least it will make your reputation among the people to a higher level. Definitely. Tony Stark laughed and then said, actually, I think his writing is really good. He is indeed my friend and he really understands me. Come on. Peppo was speechless when he looked at the tragic scene where Tony was boasting about Tony. as if he was a superhero who saved the world, willing to let go of everything for the safety of the world. What kind of person Tony is, she knows best. Maybe some are true, but there is absolutely no such exaggerated language. While the two were talking, the press officer followed Obadiah Stein in. Hey Tony, my great buddy, how are your preparations going? The press conference is about to start, this time to announce your return to the world. The stock price of our Stark Industries will definitely rise rapidly. Obadiah walked in with a cigar in his hand, smiling, and while talking, he fixed his eyes on the note in Tony's hand. Oh, you also wrote a speech. Haha, I have to say, Tony, this experience has made you mature a lot. When did you use a speech before? Come on, let me see you what is written on the prepared speech. As he said that, he prepared to step forward to take the speech and wanted to read it. Seeing Obadiah Stein's actions, Tony quickly picked up the speech and then said with a smile, "Don't worry, Stan, I know what I should do and what I should do. This time I promise to give you and the whole world a big surprise." Tony Stark looked at Obadiah Stein, the inexplicable meaning in his eyes flashed away, and then he returned to his normal smile and said, "That's good, Tony." Without capturing the meaning of Tony Stark's flash of eyes just now, Obadiah Stein stepped forward and patted Tony on the shoulder with a smile, and then said very seriously, "Although I have said these words a lot these days, but welcome back, Tony." Facing the familiar smiling face that he was no longer familiar with, Tony didn't say anything, just nodded slightly. "Welcome, oh I hope. The children of the uncle's family came to the house and died of trouble. I just wrote for a while and my thoughts were all interrupted, alas. 5 or 6-year-old children are so noisy." Scene of the press conference. When Tony Stark came out, many reporters stood up subconsciously. They held up their microphones and were about to ask questions when they saw Obadiah Stein take the initiative to step onto the stage, and then said with a smile, "Dear friends from the media, please be quiet. I know that many people are very concerned about our Tony. They have been paying attention to us since he was attacked, but fortunately Tony is back." Speaking, Obadiah Stein glanced at Tony Stark with a smile, and then continued, "I know that I am standing on the stage, and many people wish that I would go down quickly and hand over the microphone to Tony, haha, then go on. Come down, let Tony Stark tell you what he wants to announce." Hearing Obadiah Stein's words, all the media turned their attention to the clean and tidy Tony Stark in a suit. From the moment he stepped onto the stage, all cameras were on him. Ahem. Looking at the reporters in the audience, Tony Stark cleared his throat and then looked around the venue. When he saw Yi Yu at the end of the crowd, who was leaning against the wall and holding hands, looking at him with a smile, Tony Stark suddenly laughed. "I feel warm in my heart. After all this decision has been made, Tony Stark's stock price will inevitably fall like an avalanche, and I will also be criticized by countless people. Originally, I didn't expect Yi Yu to come over. After all, this kind of thing can be seen on the TV. But today, he came over without saying hello to himself. Although he was only standing in the crowd, Tony was still a little moved when he saw the warm smile on Yi Yu's face. He knew that Yi Yu was silently telling himself that he was always on the same side as him. Smiling knowingly, Tony Stark took a deep breath, and his gaze gradually became firm. Even if countless people would ridicule after today, so what if they criticize themselves? Are there few such things in these years? What's more, I'm Tony Stark, how can I be afraid of these criticisms? I still have Peppo, Rhodes, and more. Leave yourself like this, support yourself, make yourself a friend you can trust. Everyone, thank you for coming to this press conference." Looking around at all the media below, Tony Stark put the speech on the table and then said with a smile, "I know that everyone is very concerned about me, or in other words, very concerned about my being attacked and kidnapped. I won't say much about this process. After all, the Bugle newspaper has written the process in great detail. If there are still people who don't know, go and buy a newspaper from the Bugle newspaper." Hearing Tony Stark's words, the reporter from the Horn newspaper under the stage looked around triumphantly, as if they were saying that everyone present is rubbish than the most useful information transmission speed. This sentence is definitely not in the speech. This is what Tony said temporarily, and it can be regarded as raising the horn of Yi Yu during the global live broadcast. Actually, during the time I was kidnapped, I saw the things I least wanted to see. Tony Stark put away the smile on his face and put on a solemn expression. I used to think that I was right. I researched weapons to protect the world and protect the safety of ordinary people. It's like my father. So I have always been proud of this matter, because on the issue of weapons manufactured and developed by Stark Industries, I have protected many civilians. I thought this was the case, but when I was kidnapped, I realized one thing. In fact, this is not the case. Listening to Tony's words, many reporters in the audience were instantly surprised. Listening to Tony Stark's words, It seemed that they wanted to shut down Stark's industrial weapons manufacturing department. They had just caused some commotion and wanted to ask questions, but Tony Stark gave press down. I only heard Tony Stark look serious and continued to say in a concentrated voice. During the time I was kidnapped, I saw with my own eyes some people using weapons made by Stark Industries to attack civilians. And I also saw with my own eyes some ordinary people have lost their families because of these weapons. When I discovered these problems before, I used to think, is there someone secretly selling these weapons behind Stark Industries' backs? As long as I investigate and find out who is behind the scenes, then the world will be peaceful. But in fact, the reality tells me how outrageous all this is wrong. As he spoke, Tony Stark patted his heart lightly, and then said with regret, I myself am the victim of the weapons I developed with my own hands, so what about those civilians? I am a genius, there is no doubt about it. I can use the energy reactor to extend my own life. But what about those poor civilians? I know how powerful the weapon I made is, and I also know how much pain the person hurt by it will suffer. The shrapnel slowly flows into the heart, and I can only wait for death in despair. I feel it, I have a deep understanding. It seemed that he was thinking of how he relied on the battery to survive. And it seemed that through the reporters in front of him, he saw the civilians who were harmed by the weapons that he personally developed and was proud of. Tony Stark's mood gradually became heavy. The speech is no longer the hype and compassion that Yu wrote, but Tony Stark, who gradually began to speak out all the things in his heart. When I realized that the weapons I developed were not intended to protect civilians, I thought, I should stop my research. I don't want to see any civilians pay with their lives because of the weapons I made. And I don't want to see anyone die because of Stark Industries' weapons. I'm not a saint, I know what consequences my decision will bring. And I can also predict how much ridicule I will attract when I announce this. Having said that, Tony Stark's face showed unprecedented firmness. Maybe I will be ridiculed by countless people and abused by countless people. But I would rather bear this reputation of being ridiculed and cursed than see anyone or any family pay an undeserved price. Perhaps after 10 years, God will forgive me for my actions. Hearing what Tony Stark said, Obadiah Stane suddenly felt that something was wrong and just wanted to step forward to stop it. But I heard Tony Stark say directly, so, starting today, I announce that the Stark Industrial Weapons Manufacturing Department will be closed immediately. After the words fell, the reporters in the audience were in an uproar. These reporters no longer cared about the so-called order of the venue and wanted to interview Tony Stark with the microphone. You must know that this decision was so explosive that it made all the reporters go crazy. After all, Tony Stark, the reason why this billionaire can become a billionaire, and the reason why Stark Industries can be so brilliant is because they manufacture and sell weapons. But now Tony Stark announced the closure of the weapons manufacturing department, which is tantamount to breaking the wings of Stark Industry, and it has plummeted ever since. Ignoring these reporters who were frantically wanting to interview him, Tony Stark walked directly towards the back of the press conference. Looking at the reporters who wanted to chase and intercept them, Yu, who had been standing at the back, looked at Natasha Romanoff with a smile and said, "Let's go, this guy must be very disappointed now." As he spoke, he took Natasha Romanoff to the lounge. As soon as he came to the door of the lounge, he heard Tony Stark sighing in the lounge. Why, a little reluctant. Leaning against the door with his arms around his shoulders, he looked at Tony with a slightly disappointed face, and then asked with a smile, "How come didn't you already know this decision?" Seeing Yu approaching, a smile appeared on Tony Stark's face. Then he stepped forward and hugged Yu forcefully. "You shouldn't be here, man." Tony Stark looked at Yu and said very seriously, "Your appearance now will definitely cause some criticism, especially Obadiah Stane. After all, the Bugle newspaper has reported too much about the inside story about my rescue." Obadiah Stane was a little skeptical about this rescue operation, but now that you're here, I'm afraid he will be against you. Seeing the smile on Tony's face, Yu shook his head lightly. "It doesn't matter if he wants to deal with me, let him do it. I'm afraid he hasn't sent anyone to approach me, the first person to die is him." "Okay, let's not talk about this." Yu waved his hand, then looked at Tony and asked with a smile. "The weapon manufacturing department has always been the most precious child of Stark Industry. And now, abandoning his own child with his own hands must be very uncomfortable. How about it? Do you want me to have a good chat with you? I think you're thinking about my 60-year-old wine." Tony Stark glanced at Yu speechlessly, then suddenly seemed to think of something, and the discomfort in his heart dissipated in an instant. A smug smile appeared on his face again. "Would you like to visit my villa? I'm researching the armor, and when I came, I had already asked JARVIS to help color it. You should be the first to see this armor besides Peppo. I have tried flying the armor 2 days ago. How about it? Would you like to take a look? Maybe you will also like this Mark armor of. Tony Stark raised his eyebrows proudly. Looking at the smug Tony, Yu thought for a while and finally shook his head. I'm not busy with this. According to our plan, now that your decision is announced, the heat wave will come soon. I will expand the matter when I go back and drop a bomb on the already boiling lake water. Our plan can only be implemented more smoothly when everyone on the Stark Industries board of directors is worried. Saying that, Yu winked at Tony and said, "Wait for my good news." As soon as the words fell, Yu heard a rush of footsteps in the corridor and said to Tony, "But before that, you should deal with this guy Obadiah Stan first. I have already seen the comments from the brothers in the book review area, but I said it 2 days ago, why I can't speak in the book review area and the text is not allowed to push books. I also know that it is a good thing to increase subscriptions to old books, yes. Well, after the editor goes to work, I will ask the editor. Well, at least let me speak in the book review section. At the critical moment, I'd better hide it. Hey, there is no way you are so timid. Are you Tony's friend?" "I know you, Mr. Yu." Obadiah Stan, who was originally angry, forced a smile out of his ugly face when he saw Yu coming out of the lounge. "I haven't thanked you for saving Tony from the desert." Obadiah Stein had a hypocritical smile on his face. "But I didn't expect that I would let you watch the joke today, but since you are Tony's friend, I think you must have come here to persuade Tony. After all, shutting down Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing department is like cutting off an arm for Stark Industries. So from the standpoint of Tony's friend, I hope you can join me in persuading Tony to stop being so willful." Seeing the fake smile on Obadiah Stein's face, Yu shook his head indifferently. "Mr. Obadiah, you are right, I am indeed Tony's friend. However, just because I am Tony's friend, I respect any decision of Mr. Tony Stark. Even if, as you said, the closure of Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing department is like giving Stark Industries a broken arm. As a friend, the most basic thing is to support your friend, isn't it? So regarding Tony's decision, I totally agree." Hearing Yu's words, the fake smile that was originally on Obadiah Stein's face gradually disappeared. "Well, maybe you are a very good friend, but Mr. Yi, you are not a qualified businessman. Maybe you are right, but in my opinion, friends are far more important than money." After finishing speaking, Yu ignored Obadiah Stein's disappearing smile and left Stark Industries directly with Natasha Romanoff. Looking at Yu's back, Obadiah Stein's eyes gradually turned cold. Then, as if thinking of something, he just snorted coldly and then walked into the lounge. "Are you crazy? Tony, how could you do that?" As soon as he entered the lounge, seeing Tony Stark, who was sitting on the sofa talking to Peppa with a smile, Obadiah Stein's face became even more ugly at this moment. "Do you know what kind of consequences your words will bring to Stark Industry? You have to know whether it's you, Stark Industries, or your father Howard Stark. They all started out with weapons, but now you actually want to close the weapons manufacturing department of Stark Industries. Don't tell me, do you want to destroy the Stark industry that your father created by yourself? Now, before those reporters leave, hurry up and clarify with me what you just said was just a joke. After all, everyone knows your character. As long as you are willing to clarify, then they will think you are joking." Looking at Obadiah Stan with an angry face, Tony stood up very calmly. "You're right, Stan. Stark Industries was indeed founded by my father. It's also our Stark family business. Since its surname is Stark, then I have the right to make any decision. Since I announced the closure of the weapons manufacturing department, I will carry it out. There is no room for negotiation on this point." For some reason, seeing Tony Stark with a serious expression and a firm attitude, Obadiah Stein suddenly felt that the Tony in front of him was very strange at the moment. It seems that he is no longer the Tony who didn't want to care about anything and only wanted to study various things. From being kidnapped to being rescued, what happened that I didn't know? Why did Tony, who was always more obedient, be so firm at this moment? Seeing that this trick didn't work, Obadiah Stein had a kind expression on his face again, and his tone became more earnest. "Tony, you have to know that what you do is a huge blow to Stark Industry. I have been helping you deal with the board of directors these years. The group of people on the board of directors were already very dissatisfied with you. But now you suddenly made this decision and held a press conference to make this matter known to everyone. It's hard for me like you." Before Obadiah Stein could finish speaking earnestly, Tony Stark directly took Peppo's hand, walked outside and said, "If they are dissatisfied, they will be dissatisfied. What does it have to do with me? If they want to do something, then do it. I don't give a shit about their opinion or attitude. Seeing Tony Stark pulling Peppo straight out of the lounge, Obadiah Stine could no longer hide the anger in his heart. Soon, there was a sound of crackling and smashing things in the lounge. After about a few minutes, the originally luxurious lounge had become chaotic. All kinds of porcelain cups and vases were all broken into pieces, tables and chairs were all overturned on the ground, and even the LCD screen hanging on the wall was pulled off by someone and fell heavily on the ground. Obadiah Stine, who had vented his anger, still had the same look on his face at the moment. With a cold look in his eyes, he picked up the phone and prepared to make a call. Since you are disobedient, I don't mind if you die a second time. As for the young man named Yi Yu in the corridor, when Tony Stark is cleaned up, it's your turn. While thinking viciously, Obadiah Stine made a very mysterious call. Since Tony Stark announced the closure of the live broadcast and news release of the Stark Industrial Weapons Manufacturing Department, all the media began to criticize Tony Stark's decision to destroy Stark Industry. Almost in just 3 days, the stock of Stark Industries dropped constantly. This is something that has never happened before in Stark Industries. Many shareholders who held Stark Industries sold their odd shares one after another. Even some members of the board of directors were heartbroken to see the shares that symbolized money shrinking in their hands. They thought about stopping the loss in time, but no matter how hard they tried, there was no way to prevent their value from plummeting. When a report titled "Stark Industries is Going Bankrupt" appeared on the internet and in newspapers after giving examples from 7 aspects and finally drawing conclusions, the media that originally criticized this matter frantically, once again, repost and comment on this report. It seems that in just 3 days, this report has become evidence that Stark Industries must go bankrupt. In the evening, inside a high-level restaurant in Manhattan. Mr. Yi, it is really hard for me to agree to the price you offered. An old man in his 60s looked across the dining table at the young and outrageous Yi Yu, then shook his head with a smile and said, I own 11% of the shares of Stark Industries. According to the market value, even if it is sold, it will cost at least 40%. 1 billion will do. 2 billion, you directly gave me a 50% discount. I can't accept such a price. Hearing the old man's words, Yi Yu just smiled and raised the red wine in front of him, took a sip, and then said, If it was before, let alone 4 billion, 11% of Stark Industries shares, I think you won't sell it for 6 billion or even 8 billion. But Mr. Starin, it's not what it used to be. You know that the value of Stark Industries shares is shrinking day by day. I think in half a month, let alone 2 billion, even 1.5 billion will not be worth it. Hearing Yi Yu's words, Starin laughed out loud. Mr. Yi, I think 3 days ago, on the night when Tony Stark announced the closure of the weapons department, the news that Stark Industries would go bankrupt should have been sent out through your hands. Although the report was not published by the Bugle newspaper, it was published purely on the internet. But I think that real financial experts know that although the stock price of Stark Industries is constantly shrinking, it is still very difficult to go bankrupt. After all, Stark Industry has been able to stand for so many years, but it doesn't just rely on the weapon department to make money. What's more, although the stock price is constantly falling, if it is really going to go bankrupt, why does Mr. Yi have to start an acquisition? I think every child knows the truth of this. After speaking, Starin picked up the red wine in front of him and drank it with the same smile. That's right, that report was indeed written by me, and it is precisely because of my report that the value of the stock that was already declining has become faster. I don't deny this. Yi Yu spread his hands and then said unabashedly, But Mr. Stark, I will decide on the Stark industrial equity in your hand. Since you don't sell it for 2 billion, then I'll make a new quotation, 500 million. Walter, seeing the swearing smile on Yi Yu's face, and the more ruthless direct offer of 500 million this time, Starin was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly laughed. Mr. Yi, you really like to joke. I don't mean to be joking at all. Yi Yu's smile gradually faded away, and a kind of indifferent expression was restored on his face. Honestly speaking, having dinner with you is more comfortable than having dinner with my lovely Wanda. After finishing speaking, Natasha Romanoff, who was sitting next to Yi Yu, passed a document across the table. Look at what's in here. I think Mr. Starin might change his mind after reading it. Yi Yu leaned back on the chair and said calmly. With a puzzled look on his face, Starin picked up the thing wrapped in craft paper on the table and then opened it to look. After taking a look just now, Starin's pupils shrank instantly. At the same time, he raised his head and looked at Yi Yu, his eyes full of surprise. Mr. Starin, you are 60 years old this year. According to what is recorded in this document, even if you can live another 20 or 30 years, I think you can only live in a closed cell. Also, I think the savings of your life will be wasted by your son, who only knows how to eat, drink, and play in less than 3 years after you enter. Although that is an astronomical sum, but you think he can resist, can Tony and I join forces to deal with it? Having said that, Yu nodded, pretending to be enlightened, and then said with a shameful smile, "Look, I have forgotten one thing, and there are things your son has done these years. I think he should spend the rest of his life in a closed prison just like you." After hearing Yu's words, Starin quickly flipped through the content behind. The more you look at it, the more frightened you become, and the more you look at it, the more dignified your face becomes. Don't think that your relationship will save you. After all, any relationship you can imagine, Tony and I will work together to settle it. Now the choice is in your hands. What do you say, Mr. Starin? Seeing Starin with a serious face and changing eyes, Yu asked softly with an easygoing smile after half an hour. Then, Mr. Starin, we have a happy cooperation. Yu looked at the equity transfer document about Stark Industries in his hand and said with a smile, "Snort." Seeing Yu stand up and leave with his secretary, Starin raised his fist angrily and slammed the table viciously. The sound was so loud that many people subconsciously looked towards it. Walking out the door, returning to his car, and putting the equity transfer letter in his bag, Yu smiled and asked Natasha Romanoff, "How many people still need to be conquered now?" According to the list provided by Tony Stark, now only Obadiah Stan is left. Natasha Romanoff flipped through the list, then looked at Yu and said, "According to the 13 Stark Industries board members' shares we have acquired now, plus the shares in Tony Stark's hands, Stark Industries is enough to become his voice. It's just that people can't imagine that those seemingly pious guys are so dirty and ugly behind their backs." With that said, Natasha Romanoff put down the list in his hand, then looked at Yu and asked very seriously, "Are you really planning to follow what you said and let them go as long as you bought the shares? People who have done so many disgusting things to them don't care about it. Although I have experienced a lot and seen many disgusting things over the years, but this time I really hate these people." Seeing the widow's serious expression, Yu shrugged his shoulders while driving and said indifferently, "Actually, there are more dirty and ugly things in this world. You should know this. I thought you're used to it. But no matter what, I, Yu, always keep my promises and never break my promises." Hearing what Yu said, Natasha Romanoff nodded and let out a sigh of relief. Although she understood what Yu did, she still felt a little uncomfortable. "I always feel that if these sanctimonious scumbags are not dealt with, it will be a bit cheap for them. I keep my word, but you are different." Seeing Natasha Romanoff's silence, Yu couldn't help laughing. "I said that my Bugle newspaper and I will not make these things public, nor will we settle accounts with them, but I only represent myself. As for how you do it..." Yu looked at the widow sister and then said indifferently, "That's your freedom, isn't it? However, as a friendly reminder, it is best to leave this matter to SHIELD and let the people of SHIELD do it. As far as I know, if they are all sent to the hands of the F Group, it will not be of much use at all. After all, they have been in charge of Stark Industries for so many years. Black, white, and gray can all works." Seeing Yu's teasing expression, Natasha Romanoff suddenly turned her head. As if thinking of something, she suddenly laughed. "That's right anyway, you were just representing yourself and your Bugle newspaper. Although I am your assistant, I am also affiliated with SHIELD. Well, this has nothing to do with you now. Everything, it's all my own doings." Saying that, Natasha Romanoff gave Yu a thumbs up, then picked up the phone and dialed out. Soon, the phone was connected and Natasha Romanoff said directly, "I will send you some information later, Phil Coulson. You can handle this matter. This is what you are best at. As for telling Nick, you decide." After speaking, he directly sent the stored data over. After a few minutes, looking at the information displayed on the computer, Phil Coulson, who was originally elegant and easygoing, suddenly turned dark. "What's wrong?" Melinda, who was on the side, saw that Phil Coulson's face was a little strange, so she came over and asked. Natasha Romanoff is now on the line with Yu. Phil Coulson looked at Melinda, then shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "I don't know what kind of attention these two people have. You must know that Stark Industry is already in a precarious state. But as soon as these two people made a move, they immediately wiped out all the members of Stark Industries' board of directors. It is estimated that only Tony Stark and Obadiah are left now. I don't know what these two people are going to do, but I hope these two guys don't play too much." Phil Coulson sighed, then looked at Melinda and smiled. "Oh, let me see." Melinda, who has been working in a civil service for a long time, immediately went to the computer and started reading after hearing what Phil Coulson said. The more you look at Melinda, the uglier her face becomes. What are you going to do? Melinda stood up, looked at Phil Coulson and asked, what else can I do? Phil Coulson spread his hands and said, since Natasha Romanoff sent this information, it is obvious that this matter can only be left to our SHIELD. Give it to me. Melinda stretched her wrist and said with a cold face, although I have been transferred to a clerical job, I haven't been on a mission for a long time. But this time my hands are itchy. Hearing Melinda's words, Phil Coulson nodded lightly. No problem, you lead the team, I'll report the matter to the director. What kind of trouble is this? Looking at some evidence on the computer, Nick Fury suddenly covered his forehead and sighed. I'm not so sure either. Phil Coulson shook his head and said, but Natasha Romanoff sent the incriminating evidence which obviously made us do it. I know this too. Nick Fury's face was a little ugly, and while tapping his fingers on the table, he said helplessly, the things about Stark Industry have turned upside down these days. More importantly, the lady was shocked. According to her, she and Tony's father are close friends, so no matter what happens, the lady just wants me to make two requests. First, about Tony Stark saying that he wants to close the weapons manufacturing department. The lady said that although little Tony is naughty, he never grows up. Now he wants to close the weapons department founded by Mr. Howard. However, this is also a good thing. After all, since the day the weapon was produced, it was destined to kill many people. Therefore, the lady is quite supportive of Tony Stark's decision to close the weapon manufacturing department. So let's protect Tony no matter what, and don't let some caring people take this opportunity to hurt him. After all, Tony Stark, she watched him grow up. As he spoke, Nick Fury sighed. So up to now, I haven't dared to tell that lady about Tony Stark being attacked and kidnapped. After all, she's old, and I'm worried that she won't be able to bear the blow. As for the second requirement, no matter what, Stark Industries must not go bankrupt. After all, it is the company founded by her best friend Howard. She doesn't want to see her deceased, best friend's property turn into a bubble. Hearing what Nick Fury said, Phil Coulson asked curiously, you mean Miss Page, one of the three founders of our SHIELD? Who else but this lady? Nick Fury nodded lightly and then said with a headache, before this happened, Miss Page complained to me that her nephew Tony hadn't come to see her for almost half a month. What can I say? Do I have to say that half a month ago, Tony Stark was still in the desert where he was kidnapped? As he said that, Nick Fury shook his head. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Have you ever asked why Natasha Romanoff wants us to arrest all the shareholders of Stark Industries? I haven't asked yet, do you want me to make a call now? Phil Coulson shook his head, then asked. Forget it. Nick Fury thought for a while, then shook his head. She is staying by Yu's side now, and Yu is Tony Stark's best friend, so I believe Yu will not do something bad to Tony something. There must be something in the middle that we don't know. Although Natasha Romanoff didn't report this matter to us, let's execute it according to Natasha Romanoff's intention for the time being. No problem, Melinda has brought people to execute it. Phil Coulson replied with a smile. Oh, Melinda was actually dispatched by this incident. Hearing what Phil Coulson said, Nick Fury took another look at the evidence of those people sent back by Natasha Romanoff. Sure enough, after seeing the evidence about a little girl victim, he nodded in understanding. That's fine, the little girl in the Bahrain Island incident is about to become Melinda's heart demon, and she even divorced Andrew because of it. This time, let her lead the team to execute it. Maybe she can take this opportunity to get out of the nightmare. Hearing Nick Fury say that, Phil Coulson smiled and nodded. As an old friend of Melinda, Phil Coulson definitely knows how traumatic that incident brought to Melinda. After Phil Coulson left, Maria Hill, who had been silent on the side, asked, do you really trust that young man named Yu? You must know that this time SHIELD's move to arrest all the shareholders of Stark Industries is very likely a conspiracy by him. Don't talk about his friendship with Tony Stark. You must know the wealth value of Stark Industry, but it is enough for countless people to give up the so-called friendship. Seeing Hill's expressionless face and cold voice, Nick Fury shook his head slightly. I am skeptical of everything, so I definitely don't believe that a person can easily give up billions or even tens of billions of wealth to preserve the so-called friendship. But this time is different, Hill. You don't know Yu, a young man. You should read his file. After reading it, you will find that there are such perfect freaks in this world. At least I'm willing to believe in his friendship with Tony Stark. At least I think Natasha Romanoff's words are right. He makes us who are used to this cold world feel a little bit of warmth. I can't deny what you said. After a moment of silence, Hill Maria looked at Nick Fury and said seriously, but there is one thing you should know. I was sent by the World Security Council to supervise you and SHIELD. I entered the World Security Council at the age of 15. Because of this, they trust me and I can't betray them. As he said that, Hill paused for a moment. Seeing that Nick Fury had nothing to say, he continued. So there are some things that I need to report to the World Security Council. Whether it's about EU or about Stark Industries. You can trust EU, Natasha Romanoff can trust EU, but whether I believe it or not is not important. What matters is whether the World Security Council believes him or not. I know. After Maria Hill finished speaking, Nick Fury nodded lightly. This is exactly what I admire about you. From the first day you entered SHIELD, I knew that you were sent by the World Security Council to supervise mine. So I didn't hide many things from you. I just wanted to make the World Security Council trust you more, but this matter. Nick Fury raised his head and looked at Maria Hill with which of his intact eyes. I hope you don't report this matter to the world for the time being. I have more important uses. You are making me violate my duties. Maria Hill frowned when she heard Nick Fury's request. That depends on how you choose. Nick Fury said without giving in. He has always admired Maria Hill, whether it is the workability or the obsession and loyalty in his heart. So he really wants Hill to be loyal to SHIELD, not to the World Security Council or something. After all, sometimes, some of his actions and methods will definitely violate the rules of the World Security Council. At this time, he needs someone who can speak for him and deal with it for him in front of the World Security Council. There is no doubt that Maria Hill, whom I have always admired for her workability, is the most suitable candidate, so Nick Fury must win her to stand on his side. Only in this way can SHIELD truly become an iron plate. Looking into Nick Fury's eyes, Maria Hill was silent for a moment. Without saying whether to answer or not, she turned and left his office directly. Seeing Maria Hill turn and leave, a smile suddenly appeared on Nick Fury's face. No choice is the best choice. It seems that my first step has already begun to work. Go back to your office. Hill took out his mobile phone, looked at the very familiar number of the member of the World Security Council on the mobile phone, just about to dial out, but hesitated again. A few seconds later, Hill closed the phone directly, as if talking to himself and as if comforting himself. Since Nick Fury said that EU is trustworthy, let's wait and see for the time being anyway, it should be no big problem. Maria Hill, although she usually treats everyone coldly, she also knows that sometimes some flexibility is needed. Although sometimes I take a step back, then I will take a second step back and a third step, but she's not just someone sent by the World Council to oversee SHIELD, overseeing Nick Fury. She. Also part of SHIELD. Inside the car. Seeing Yu, who had just finished talking with Wanda, the widow slumped on the co-pilot without caring about her image. Watching the car drive towards the suburbs, she couldn't help asking curiously, "Where do you want to take me? This doesn't seem like the way home." "Go to the theater." Yu shook the phone, then said with a smile, "Someone invited us to watch a very exciting performance, so how can we miss this good show when we receive the invitation?" "Watching a play." Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu in confusion. Then, as if thinking of something, she couldn't help sitting upright, watching the buildings outside the car window getting less and less, then said softly, "Is it Tony Stark?" Yu nodded and said with a smile, "He has recently developed a Mark series armor. According to him, this will be the second time to use the Mark armor to fight. The first time I went to the desert where he was kidnapped, rescued some civilians, and learned something by myself. This is the second battle of the Mark series armor. It is a new form of battle that we have never seen before, so he invited us to witness this battle that spans the ages." Yu looked at Natasha Romanoff and explained, "Fighting is fighting, what new tricks can you play? I have participated in countless battles, what kind of scenes have I never seen?" The widow curled her lips, but her eyes were full of curiosity, under the moonlight beside the lone stone. The night wind blew slowly, and Tony Stark stood alone on the side of the mountain, looking up at the half-moon hanging in the sky with an indescribable loneliness on his face. What is he doing? Playing performance art. Don't you think it's childish? Inside the car, Natasha Romanoff asked Yu with black lines on his face, looking at Tony Stark with binoculars as if he had turned into a werewolf Zioyu. Look carefully, that's not Tony Stark. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's words, Yu looked at Tony Stark standing there looking at the moon alone, and then replied with a smile. Hearing what Yu said, Natasha Romanoff picked up the binoculars again and looked at Tony Stark. After watching carefully for a while, she nodded in a sudden realization. So that's it, it's actually a holographic projection. But don't say it, this holographic image is almost real. If it wasn't for night breeze blowing but his hair kept moving regularly, I really thought it was him. We are far away from him, so it is difficult to find out if he is real compared to other people. Yu smiled, then put his hands behind his head and leaned back on the chair. Get ready to watch the show. More than half an hour later in the current holographic projection, Tony Stark still looked the same. But after waiting for a long time, there was still no movement. Just when Natasha Romanoff was a little bored, suddenly there was a sound in the forest not far away. Somebody is coming. As soon as the voice fell, I saw some people wearing black clothes, and a small group of heavily armed men quietly marching in the direction of Tony Stark with weapons. Looking at the team members, Natasha Romanoff complained, "Aren't these people brains? They can't see it. Who would keep standing and looking at the moon for more than half an hour? What professional team do you think Obadiah Stine will have?" Yu said very easily. "Don't forget this is Manhattan and it's Tony's territory. You must know that since Tony was kidnapped and returned, countless people's eyes are all on him. At this time, the real team will not be so stupid as to accept Obadiah Stine's order." Speaking of which, Yu smiled and looked at Natasha Romanoff. "You know, Tony and I already knew that Obadiah Stine is looking for someone to deal with us. Someone has tipped me off already." "Who?" Hearing Yu's words, the widow sister asked curiously. "Who would know that Obadiah Stine wants to deal with you and Tony Stark in the first place?" Looking at the curious widow, Yu smiled easily and said, "Jin Bing." "Jin Bing? Is that the underground king who claims to be Hell's Kitchen or even the whole of New York?" Natasha Romanoff glanced at Yu, then laughed. "I didn't expect that you are also connected with Jin Bing. You don't want to ask if I didn't take advantage of Jin and do bad things. Or I didn't collude with Jins." Looking at Natasha Romanoff with a calm expression, Yu became interested instead. "You must know that I gave Jin Bing this news when I told Tony he was very curious about my relationship with Jin Bing." "Are you not curious? Come on," the widow said with a relaxed face. "You may do wrong things, but you will never do bad things. Although I have not been with you for a long time, but brother, you are too underestimating your own cleanliness." "Heart, maybe you haven't realized it yourself. Although you often advertise that you are not a superhero, when you see some civilians being bullied, you look calm on the surface, but your heart is full of anger. Like the last time when saving Tony Stark. You saw those poor people's homes destroyed, homeless, adults dead, children forced to live hungry, skinny, and miserable. You the hostility emanating from my body, but even I, who has seen countless storms and waves, feel a little frightened. How can a person like you who can't see any suffering and misery in this world be a villain? I guess you'd be P***D off when you saw what Nick Fury's old friend Frank did. Although he did things that I thought were pretty good sometimes. So an upright and kind person like you regards himself as a super evil person. Although many of your methods are not in compliance with the rules, isn't this normal? In fact, I have met all kinds of people. The reason why I have been by your side is not just to avoid people who want to take advantage of you, or to lead you astray." Natasha Romanoff looked at Yu and smiled with a very relaxed and joyful expression on her face. "It is because I am always extremely relaxed when I am by your side. The kind of comfort that radiates from the bottom of my heart has been my long time never got it. It's like the villa you're in with Wanda and Pietro. It really makes me feel like I'm at home." Listening to the widow's words, Yu was silent for a moment, watching the team not far away quietly walking towards the direction of Tony Stark's holographic projection. Thoughts fly away constantly. Do you really have what Natasha Romanoff said? Is a nice guy? Not necessarily, although I am not a big evil person, but I am not a kind person either. At least his hands were already stained with a lot of blood. Yu doesn't believe that Natasha Romanoff or that Schild doesn't know these things. Why do they still see themselves like this? Could it be that he is hiding some good person's attributes? But that's fine. Natasha Romanoff's statement just now can be seen as Schild or Nick Fury's opinion on himself. As long as you make that impression, at least you don't have to worry about Schild. No, the Snake and Shield Bureau set its sights on itself. It is also a good thing. The vaguely black-clothed squad attacked in the direction of Tony Stark with full armor, and after a distance of less than half a kilometer, they directly raised the weapons in their hands and fired directly. Almost instantly, more than a dozen bullets all flew towards Tony Stark. It's just that after the bullet hit Tony Stark, the expected Tony Stark didn't fall down but still stood there, and the bullet passed through his body and he didn't know where it went. "Up man, how is it? This battle armor is very handsome. Are you ready to watch the show?" Just when Yu came back to his senses and was just about to watch the play, Tony Stark's voice suddenly appeared. It turned out that this guy had been hiding in the corner. At this moment, Tony Stark was wearing the latest Mark series armor, knocking on Yu's car window and said proudly, Hearing Tony Stark's voice inside the armor, Yu raised a middle finger at Tony without even thinking about it. It's really boring. Tony curled his lips and then began to say excitedly, after you watch this battle, I think you will be very envious of me. With that said, Tony Stark directly controlled the armor and flew towards the group of people who wanted to attack him. It took almost a few breaths to see that Tony, who was wearing red and gold armor, landed directly in the middle of the group, and then used his battle armor to fight directly with the person who wanted to assassinate his team. It can be said that this is not destined to be a level of fighting. These guys hired by Obadiah Stine are not professional. Second is not Captain America, and third is not Green Fat Man, so they can't fight Tony Stark in armor at all. Together, so almost in the blink of an eye, the battle was won or lost. Seeing that Tony Stark was about to solve the problem, Yu started the car directly, turned around, and drove towards the original road. It can be said that this battle is not interesting at all, although it is said that this is the armor of the Mark series, but more exciting things Yu has watched countless times in the movie. The battle against the Hulk armor and the battle mode of the Nano Warframe are far better than the current original form of the Warframe. After all, after seeing all kinds of fierce battle scenes, would he still look good at an armor that bullies people with Wang Bakwin? I think Tony should set up a melee combat program. Look at the battle just now, there is no trace of beauty at all. While driving, Yu complained. So Natasha Romanoff was very curious about the armor on Tony Stark. He said to Yu with interest, don't you think that armor just now is very advanced? It can fly and use various weapons if impossible. Yu knew what Natasha Romanoff wanted to say and directly denied it. That is Tony Stark's armor, no one else can use it. He will not authorize it to anyone. Whether it is SHIELD or the people on Jun's side. Well, except Rhodes. Hearing what Yu said, the widow sister also nodded in understanding. If it was her, it seems that she would not give what belongs to her to SHIELD. Just halfway through the car, I saw Tony Stark flying over while controlling the battle armor, maintaining a speed parallel to Yu's car, and asked curiously while flying, how did you get away? The last scene just now was very strange. Wonderful, especially the scene where the remaining few people want to escape, but I chase them and beg for mercy. It's a pity if you saw it you would. Before the excited Tony Stark finished speaking, Yu opened the car window and replied, can't you design some combat procedures? I really can't watch your battle scene just now. If you use weapons, you'll probably kill these small fish and shrimps in 2 or 3 hits. But why do you have to use the robustness of the armor to fight them in close combat? Fighting is fine, my buddy. Let JARVIS help you design some automatic combat programs. Trust me, it will be good for you. Hearing Yu's complaints, Tony Stark, who was originally very excited like a child, suddenly became speechless. So, this beautiful lady sitting in the co-pilot was the fight I just had really ugly. I don't believe this guy Yu, he must be jealous of my armor to say that. After all, I am a genius. I believe that a beautiful lady like you will be able to make a very fair evaluation. After hearing Yu's evaluation, Tony was speechless and immediately asked Natasha Romanoff, the co-pilot. The speed of the car is not fast, so even with Yu's window open, his voice will not be blown away by the wind. In fact, this pair of flying armor is really refreshing. Natasha Romanoff said very fairly. Look, that's what I said, you're jealous of me, aren't you? Haha, I knew it. Before the widow could finish speaking, Tony Stark laughed out loud inside the battle armor, and then said directly, dude, I'll wait for you at Stark Industries tomorrow, I'm really looking forward to it. Obadiah Stane sees me after taking control of the Stark Industry. What kind of expression will it have? Maybe it's time to make a break. After speaking, Tony Stark flew away directly. But the way of fighting is ugly. Seeing Tony Stark fly away at an instant speed, as if she was afraid that the widow would say this, Natasha Romanoff spread her hands helplessly and said, so you two are really friends. If you don't want to listen, it doesn't matter what others say. Finish. When I got home, it was past 10 o'clock, but Wanda and Pietro were watching TV in the living room. After seeing Yu come back, Pietro yawned. Wanda, on the other hand, ran over bouncingly, pounced on Yu, and then showed a smirk expression. Scratched Wanda's nose, then looked at Pietro and said with a smile, even if it's a holiday tomorrow, I need to go to bed early. Next time I come back late, don't wait for me. I can't help it, my sister. Well, I'm not sleepy at all, the variety shows on TV are pretty good. Pietro, who was just about to say something, saw Wanda turn his head and stare at him and changed his words instantly, looking like the TV was good. Wanda nodded in satisfaction, then continued to smirk at Yu. Seeing this appearance, how could Yu not know what happened? Stop always bullying Pietro in the future. Yi Yu looked at Wanda dotingly and said with a smile. Who bullied him anyway? He is also my brother. How could I bully him? There was a sly look in Wanda's eyes and then he laughed. Pietro, who was sitting on the sofa beside him, couldn't help curling his lips when he heard Wanda's words and muttered in a low voice. It should be the older brother, forget it. For Superman's sake, the younger brother should be the younger brother. You guys chat first, I'm going to take a shower. Natasha Romanoff rubbed Wanda's head as a greeting, then walked into the bathroom. Brother Yi Yu, you haven't told me a story for several days. Wanda raised her head, looked at Yi Yu and said very seriously, there are 2 years, 3 months and 13 days left and I will be 18. By then, he. Rubbing Wanda's head, Yi Yu nodded slightly. I took Wanda back to her room. The so-called storytelling is actually talking and chatting before going to bed. After all, Wanda is not a little Morgan, and there is no need to tell a story about a little girl named Morgan once upon a time, and she fell asleep. Wanda just wants to be intimate with Yi Yu and act like a baby. After all, according to Wanda's current age, it's the age to act like a baby. After talking for half an hour and watching Wanda fall asleep, Yi Yu gently closed the door and then took out the phone to call back. Although I don't know why Jin Bing called himself at night, it should not have anything to do with the lawyer under his banner, Daredevil Matthew. At least, Yi Yu has not heard of any intersection between Matthew and Jin until now. Listening to what Jin Bin told on the phone, Yi Yu knew something inside that he didn't know. For example, tonight, not only should Tony Stark be attacked, but a group of people were hired by Obadiah Stine to attack him on his way back. It's just that they didn't expect that they didn't come back according to the original route today, but drove to the suburbs, so they didn't wait for themselves at all. He didn't expect that Jin Bing knew about this matter, so he let Bullseye kill them all. After talking about this matter, Jin Bin was still beating around the bush, and a little bit shy, hoping that Yi Yu could help his son get into the best high school in Manhattan. After all, although Jin Bin is very powerful, some things cannot be resolved by relying on his power. According to Jin Bing, if it wasn't for the stubborn old headmaster who didn't want the money he donated, he wouldn't have any fear of his reputation at all. He wants to mail a bullet, best high school in Manhattan. This is a breeze for Yi Yu. After agreeing to Jin Bing's request, Yi Yu returned to his room. As soon as I turned on the light, I saw the widow lying there in a very shapeless manner. What happened? The widow looked at Yi Yu and asked with a smile. For the appearance of the widow's sister, Yi Yu was not surprised at all, but just told what happened and then walked into the bathroom without paying attention. For his own assassination, to be honest, Yi Yu didn't care at all after all. Even if he didn't have Jin and help to solve them, he could easily kill them. It's just that no one knows what the widow's sister is thinking at this moment, but it is not difficult to see that there is a dangerous look in the widow's sister's eyes. It seems like a decision has been made. The second master of the family is going to have a funeral today, but our place is still very strict. Only 20 people are allowed to attend the funeral. Xiao Jiu and the second master of the family are actually not very close, and thought that he would not be affected, but after hearing the news, my heart was still in a panic. I knew that my second master had advanced lung cancer and couldn't eat. When he could only drink nutrient solution every day, he was already mentally prepared. However, after hearing the news of the second master's death today, I still feel very sad. Well, the next day, inside the Stark Industries conference room, Obadiah Stine sat at the head of the table with a cigar in his mouth, frowning while looking at his watch. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, he finally couldn't help but picked up the phone and called his secretary directly. Where's the board of directors? Didn't you say that a board meeting will be held today? Why didn't anyone come? Have you notified them? Hearing Obadiah Stine's angry voice on the phone, the secretary replied tremblingly, Mr. Obadiah, I have notified all the members of the board of directors, but since yesterday, I have not been able to get through a single call. I don't even know what happened. Listening to the secretary's words, Obadiah Stine frowned and hung up the phone. Damn, what happened? With that said, Obadiah Stine picked up his mobile phone, ready to make joking calls to the members of the board of directors. The first one didn't work, and the second one still didn't get through. Just when they were about to make a third call, the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open. Wow, you came early. Tony Stark, who came in with Peppo, looked at Obadiah Stine in the main seat of the conference room and then spoke. Tony, why are you here? Watching Tony Stark walk in with Peppo, Obadiah frowned. Seeing that Yi Yu and assistant Natasha Romanoff also came in, he couldn't help but said directly. First of all, Tony, you have been deposed by the members of the board of directors, so you don't need to participate in the board of directors this time. Second, this is the board of directors of our Stark Industries. Outsiders like Yi Yu standing beside you are not qualified. You can't say that. Before Obadiah Stein could finish speaking, Yu pulled out his chair and sat down. His colleague took the document from Natasha Romanoff and placed it directly in front of Obadiah. Look carefully, except for some odd shares and small shares, I own 35% of the shares of Stark Industries. So you actually told me that I am not qualified to participate in the board of directors of Stark Industries. Hearing Yu's words, Obadiah Stein frowned and opened the documents in front of him, looking at them one by one. The more you look at Obadiah Stein, the uglier his face becomes. Boom. He slammed the documents on the table heavily, then pointed to Yu and asked, "Why did the members of the board of directors sell you the shares of Stark Industries? Why didn't I know about this? What right do you have to know?" Yu looked at Obadiah indifferently. First, the transfer of shares is reasonable and legal. Second, Stark Industries' surname is Stark, not your Obadiah. You are only temporarily in charge of Stark Industries. Really regard yourself as the master of Stark Industry. After Yu's voice fell, Tony on the side didn't care about Obadiah Stein's ugly face and said directly, "Now Yi owns 35% of the shares of Stark Industries, more than 79%. So Obadiah Stein, I now formally declare in my capacity as master of Stark Industries that you are stopped." Listening to Tony's words, Obadiah Stein's face became even uglier. Just when I was about to say something, I heard Yu continue, "I support Tony in everything because we are friends. In addition, I will transfer the shares of Stark Industry in my hand to Tony for a penny. Mr. Stark." As for you. As he spoke, Yu snapped his fingers casually, and soon, a group of men in black suits walked in. "Mr. Obadiah Stein, we now have sufficient evidence that the two attacks and assassinations of Mr. Tony Stark are related to you, so please come with us. Please don't be rougher than us." Clenching his fists with both hands, Obadiah Stein looked at Yu and Tony Stark with a very angry face, and couldn't help panting constantly. His red eyes were full of resentment. "Don't look at us with that kind of eyes. Besides, you need to pay for your legal fees. From now on, Stark Industries will not pay you any fees." Tony Stark shrugged his shoulders, looked at Obadiah indifferently. "For the sake of you helping me for more than 20 years, I wanted to give you a chance more than once. But you always let me down, Obadiah. I don't know why you have become like this. Isn't it enough to control the Stark Industry? You must drive me out to kill me." The more he said, the more dignified Tony Stark's face became. To be honest, he really didn't want to see the man he once regarded as his uncle come to this point. Seeing that Obadiah Stein was about to say something with an angry face, Yu didn't wait for him to say something, and directly signaled the group of people in black suits to push Obadiah Stein out. Seeing Obadiah Stein, who was constantly struggling but still being taken away, Tony Stark let out a long sigh. Turning his head, seeing Yu laughed, then stood up, hugged Yu, and hammered Yu's back hard a few times. "Thanks, buddy. Don't be so nasty." Yu pushed Tony away, then punched him with a smile and said, "But my work is done. How Stark Industry will go next? Who is the new manager? You need to think about it yourself." "I've already thought about this." Tony smiled and winked at Yu, then glanced at Peppo, who was sorting out the share documents. "Very good choice, but in my opinion you should settle the relationship first. What the hell is always shy? Don't tell me you haven't figured it out yet." Yu put his arms around Tony's shoulders, glanced at Peppo's direction, and then teased softly. "Well, I got up late. My second grandfather passed away yesterday, and I didn't fall asleep until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I felt really uncomfortable, although I was mentally prepared for it. Well. SHIELD attached cell. Obadiah Stein stood by the door, constantly barking out for a lawyer. After he was imprisoned here, he realized that this place was not an ordinary prison at all. Although the confinement rooms here are all single-person, it is very different from ordinary prisons. This discovery made Obadiah extremely panic. If it was an ordinary place, maybe he could find a way to leave here according to the contacts he had accumulated over the years. But the problem is that he doesn't know who he was taken away by now, and he doesn't know where he is being held. Especially the guards who are constantly patrolling, the clothes they are wearing are very different from ordinary prison guards. Listening to the roar of Obadiah Stan in the prison cell, the guards didn't even look at him. "Many people have been arrested over the years and you still want a lawyer? What dream? This is where SHIELD gathers criminals. How can there be any lawyers?" Just as Obadiah Stan was clutching the iron door and screaming continuously, the sound of footsteps gradually came. Hearing the footsteps getting closer, Obadiah Stein hurriedly called for help, but when he saw the person coming, he was a little dumbfounded. It was none other than the widow, Natasha Romanoff. "Open the doors." Natasha Romanoff said something to the guard, and after the guard opened the door, the widow sister walked in. I know who you are the assistant of which damn you, where is this place? You must have imprisoned me here privately, right? I want to sue you, this is detention. After Obadiah Stein watched Natasha Romanoff walk in, he immediately pointed at Natasha Romanoff and threatened. It's come to this point, and you still naively think that you can still go out. The widow smiled mockingly, then took out the gun directly from behind and pointed it at Obadiah Stan. Being pointed at by the widow with a gun, Obadiah quickly stepped back a few steps in panic. What are you going to do? Don't mess around, you are murdering. Murders? After listening to Obadiah's words, the widow suddenly sneered. This is not murder, but I just want to kill you. You know, if you want to deal with Tony Stark, then no one will care about you. If you want Tony Stark's life, then SHIELD will intervene, but this has nothing to do with me. But you actually want to do something to Yi, you even sent someone to ambush him. The widow looked at Obadiah Stein coldly, as if looking at a corpse. Do you know, for the first half of my life I have been in a situation where I was displaced and hunted down. The world is so big, but there is no room for me. Later, although I joined SHIELD and had the protection of SHIELD, the people in the Red House stopped chasing and killing me. However, SHIELD is only my place of work after all. I have no relatives or family members. But it's different now. The widow looked at Obadiah Stein and said word by word. Although I have only stayed by his side for less than a month, I finally feel a little warmth, a kind of warmth that belongs to home. This is what I've been dreaming of. You will never understand. When a person who has been wandering and desperate finally finds a place where she can rest assured, what kind of crazy things she will do for this place. If you can be happy and safe, who would like to be displaced and hunted down to the end of the world? It's also because of this, since he gave me a little warmth, I naturally treat him as my family member, my own brother. But why? You actually want to destroy the little warmth I finally got. Say it yourself should you die. As she spoke, the widow pulled the bolt directly, and just as she was about to do it, she heard a gentle and refined voice behind her. Natasha Romanoff, you'd better not do this. Hearing the voice behind her, the widow didn't turn her head. She was still staring at Obadiah in front of her. Phil Coulson, are you here to stop me? Actually, you are making a mistake. Phil Coulson shrugged his shoulders and said, I know you're angry that Yu was assassinated by Obadiah's men, but isn't he all right? Besides, this is the prison cell of SHIELD. Although Obadiah Stan made a mistake, he can only stay here for the rest of his life. This is his punishment for his mistakes. That's right, come and get this lunatic. Hearing Phil Coulson's words, Obadiah seemed to have seen the dawn of life-saving. He just wanted to ask Phil Coulson to get Natasha Romanoff away, but before he could finish speaking, he heard a bang. Putting the weapon away, the widow turned around, looked at Phil Coulson and smiled. What do you want to say? It's okay, but I hope you and the director had better have an explanation. After all, you made a mistake. Seeing Obadiah Stan, whose head was pierced by a bullet and turned into a corpse lying on the ground, Phil Coulson said helplessly, I'll talk to Nick Fury, get relegated, I don't care anyway. The widow shrugged her shoulders indifferently, then pointed to Obadiah Stein's body on the ground and said with a smile, However, Phil Coulson, it will be hard for you to deal with the scene. I'll let someone deal with it, but this is the first time something like this has happened in SHIELD's prison cell. Phil Coulson shook his head helplessly. It doesn't matter, there will be more and more in the future. At worst, I will deal with people who want to hurt ye in the future. The widow patted Phil Coulson on the shoulder, then walked out with a smile. Only Phil Coulson was left alone looking at Obadiah, who was already dead, still with a horrified expression, and then sighed. You said, it's not good for you to provoke anyone but Natasha Romanoff. I believe that even if you die, you will die in vain. The director will not haggle over Natasha Romanoff just because of a dead man. With that said, Phil Coulson greeted and asked the guards to come and clean up the scene. Driving, Yu is driving on Manhattan Road. After passing by an open-air coffee plaza, Yu suddenly saw a guy sitting there alone. I am using a paintbrush on white paper, I don't know what I am drawing. In fact, Yu recognized who this guy was from the first moment he saw him. Originally, he didn't want to step forward to disturb him. But when he saw the very lonely figure who was out of tune with this world and sitting there alone, Yu stopped the car involuntarily. The lonely, dazed figure at this moment, as if abandoned by the whole world, easily reminds Yu of himself 5 years ago. In other words, when I just traveled to this world, my eyes were also blank. I don't know what to do at all. After all, when I cross the dimension of time and reality and encounter a familiar but strange world, the feeling of loneliness and desolation cannot be described in words. For countless days and nights, Yu wanted to go home more than once, but maybe I can never go back. just like the guy sitting there alone now as if abandoned by the familiar world. In loneliness, there is sadness. In bewilderment, there is a little helplessness about the new world. There is Wi-Fi available here. The waiter brought a cup of coffee, looked at the handsome, upright man in front of him, smiled and reminded him. But the man looked at the waitress in a daze and asked in confusion, Wi-Fi, what is that? Listening to the man's words, the waitress put away the smile on her face. Thinking that he was teasing herself, she turned and left. It's just that she doesn't know, he really doesn't understand what a wireless network is. In his time, perhaps there was no such thing as the internet. Watching the waitress leave, Steve Rogers' eyes dimmed, and then he smiled self-deprecatingly. This was already the first time he didn't know how many times he had said the wrong thing. He is really serious and trying very hard to integrate into this world, but whether it's new things that have never been seen before or the fast-paced crowd, they seem to exclude him naturally, reminding him all the time that this is not the world he knows. When there is no acquaintance in the whole world, when a person faces this strange world alone, perhaps most people have already collapsed. But he's different, he's Steve Rogers, a man who can be beaten but not knocked down. Although, after he woke up, he wanted to meet the girl he loved so much more than once. The person who missed the appointment was himself. He missed a date 70 years ago. Maybe he was still so strong when he was still young, but he still couldn't meet the girl with gray hair. He is not afraid of breaking down, not afraid of being sad. But for her, her own appearance was too cruel. Maybe if I didn't accept super serum back then, I would have become a painter, and I wouldn't have such an unforgettable heartache. Steve said to himself secretly, but if he could do it all over again, would he regret it? No, no. Steve shook his head lightly, took out the pocket watch with the photo from his pocket, and put it in the left pocket closest to his heart. This is his only warmth and comfort. Suppressing the images that kept flashing back in his mind, suppressing the feeling of suffocation that was hard to breathe, Steve rushed to pick up the pencil again and continued to draw. Now there is not much of anything, but there is too much time and it is too long. So long that he doesn't know what to do and where he is going. The place I used to be most familiar with and could find with my eyes closed perhaps is no longer the home I am familiar with. The bell tower on the opposite side is gradually floating on the white paper, so vivid and detailed, as if the sound of shells exploding and the sound of my own roaring commando singing and drinking are still heard in my ears. The joyful laughter of his best friend Bucky and her voice calling. This era is very good, food has changed more, it is more delicious, technology is more developed, and various diseases that cannot be solved in my own era can also be cured. It's just missing my friend, my brother, and the girl I love. I don't know if the Stork Club is still on that street in Brooklyn. If it is, maybe, I can still go and see if there is anyone else dancing. Maybe I can go to a dance alone, although I won't, nor did she teach. Thinking of this, Steve laughed, but there was a trace of bitterness in that smile. Own, really miss him, them and her. The coffee here is really good. Hearing a gentle voice in his ear, Steve Rogers looked up. Under the sun, a young man with a warm smile was looking at him with his hands in his pockets. His eyes were so pure. When people see it for the first time, they will feel good about it. Can I sit here? With a gentle smile, Yu asked softly, definitely. Hearing Yu's words, Steve Rogers responded with a smile, and then motioned Yu to sit wherever he wanted. You draw very well, very realistic. Yu smiled and said as he watched Steve paint the clock tower opposite with a pencil on the white paper. Thank you, but it's okay, I haven't painted for a long time. Steve looked at Yu, then laughed, and a flash of memory flashed in his eyes. I remember the last time I drew a picture. What I drew was a monkey holding an umbrella and riding a unicycle. Thinking back carefully, seems to have been a long time ago. Everything seems like a dream, doesn't it? He signaled the waiter to bring him a cup of coffee, and after paying, Yu smiled and said softly, when awakening comes, it feels like the world has changed. It has become so strange, so unreal. It seems that the memories of yesterday are still circling in my mind, but in the blink of an eye, it is a long, long time ago. Listening to Yu's words, Steve Rogers raised his eyebrows subconsciously, and then nodded slightly. He didn't know if Yu recognized him, but he felt that what Yu was talking about was not him, as if it was Yu himself. It's very strange, how could a young man have such a feeling? Looking at the Yu in front of him, he should not be very old. Logically speaking, he shouldn't feel this way. Steve could clearly see a trace of nostalgia in Yu's eyes. It was obvious that he, like himself, was abandoned by the world. Thinking of this, Steve shook his head slightly. The look in your eyes just now is full of loneliness and longing. It seems to be the kind that is unforgettable. Steve looked at Yu, then said with a smile, it's hard to imagine that this kind of emotion will appear on a young man like you. Aren't you the same? Listening to Steve's words, Yu also laughed. My eyes are full of loneliness and your face is also full of stories. So are we even? Steve asked with a smile. I don't know why, just after meeting for the first time, Steve felt that the young man in front of him seemed to really get along with him. Perhaps, if you can know the past of the other party, you may have a lot to say. The kind of obsession engraved in the bones cannot be pretended. At least if Steve Rogers is a person abandoned by time, then Yi Yu is a person abandoned by the dimension of the real world. As Natasha Romanoff said, who wants to be homeless if they can be happy? What's more, was he abandoned by his own world and came to such a world? No matter how good this place is, there is no home. Steve saw his own loneliness in Yi Yu, and why didn't Yi Yu see his own loneliness in Steve? When crossing over, Yi Yu once asked the system if he could return to his own world and see his family again. But the answer was extremely cruel, so cruel that Yi Yu didn't dare to miss his family in the middle of the night. I can't go back. What despair. The appearance of Wanda and Pietro injected a bit of warmth into Yi Yu's cold villa, but even in the warm villa, the heart that was abandoned and frozen by the dimension of reality could not be revived. No one wants to leave their family members. If the distance between them is only a distance, even if it is a distance of hundreds of millions of light years, Yi Yu will find a way to go back, yes. What cannot be touched will always be despair. Yi Yu has never forced himself not to think about these things and dare not recall them. Whenever he recalls the warmth of his family and the smiles of his parents, he will feel as if a needle is stuck in his heart and cannot be pulled out. Even touching it lightly will make you unable to breathe in pain, so when he saw Steve Rogers, who was also exuding this emotion, Yi Yu stopped the car involuntarily. Come over, maybe. Two people who are also abandoned may bring a little comfort to each other. I want a drink, how about you? Turning his head, looking at the Steve Rogers with a name of loneliness engraved on his face, Yi Yu asked with a smile. I wanted to, but I can't get drunk. Steve Rogers smiled wryly and shook his head. Maybe using alcohol to anesthetize yourself is a good way to escape, but this way may never be possible for me. Who said that? Yi Yu raised his eyebrows, then said with a smile. There is a saying that everyone is drunk when wine is not drunk. Although it does not describe the meaning, it can at least bring a little comfort. So do you want to come? Hearing the invitation from Yi Yu, he saw Yi Yu exuding the same aura as himself. Steve Rogers was silent for a while, then nodded suddenly with a smile. All right, let the two same people get drunk together. He didn't know who Yi Yu was, and he didn't know if he was an enemy. But now he just wants to do this, it's that simple. Even the SHIELD agent who had been staring at him from a distance felt inexplicably sad. After all, Captain America was kidnapped by a stranger and boarded that expensive sports car. How should I explain to the director? Natasha Romanoff didn't know what Nick Fury would do to her for solving Obadiah Stine in SHIELD's cell. But even if she knew, she wouldn't care. It's just Obadiah and there is no way to compare with himself. I believe Nick Fury is also very aware of this matter. In fact, Nick Fury is having a headache right now. It's not that he has a headache. Natasha Romanoff killed Obadiah Stine. In fact, Nick Fury wouldn't stop it even if he knew Natasha Romanoff was going to do it. Even if the person is in a special cell at SHIELD. Justin Obadiah, can he be compared with the famous Black Widow, not to mention the damage he did to Tony? If he hadn't been the director of SHIELD, Nick Fury would have killed him immediately. Who made Tony Stark's father named Howard Stark. And her aunt is still alive, and she is still talking about that little heartless Tony who hasn't come to see her in the past month. That alone would make Nick Fury want to kill Obadiah Stane, so if Natasha Romanoff does kill it, no big deal. What really gave Nick Fury a headache? Legend, who had just recovered, was actually abducted by someone. After hearing the news, Nick Fury broke out in a cold sweat. Although he really believed that the immortal Legend who lived up to his reputation would not be easily brainwashed. What if the person who abducted him was a bad person? What should I do if I induce him to do some bad things while he is not familiar with this world? What will I do then? For this reason, Nick Fury had a bit of a headache, but knowing that it was Yi Yu, whom he was extremely fond of, and who wanted to do everything possible to win over the team he originally envisioned and wanted to form for Carol Danvers in the future, immediately relieved. Since it's him, it's fine. After all, this is a person who is very good at comforting others with warmth and sunshine. Even Natasha Romanoff was so moved by the warmth that she personally took action to kill Obadiah, who wanted to murder him in the special confinement room of SHIELD. Therefore, since Captain America was abducted by him, it is not a big problem. After all, the world has changed since the Legend recovered. Perhaps the loneliness, sadness, and loneliness in his heart will be embraced by warmth. As long as the Legend is not abducted, it will be fine to abduct the newspaper and publishing house under his banner. Thinking of this, Nick Fury, who was originally troubled, was also amused by his own thoughts. Are you kidding me, arranging a legend into my own newspaper? No matter how you think about it, it is impossible. After all, what was the legend doing in a newspaper? Be a reporter looking for a story. Or become a person in charge of copywriting. Don't make trouble, that's a legendary hero who lives up to his reputation. How could he do such a job? But there are some things I have to ask. After all, this guy has just recovered. And when he opens his eyes, he will be a legend 70 years later, so he must take care of him because he is still not very familiar with this world. Thinking of this while dialing the phone, Nick Fury felt very wise about his decision to let Natasha Romanoff be EU's support. After all, who would have thought that EU would abduct Captain America? Natasha Romanoff, who was driving back to the newspaper building, laughed when she saw the caller ID. It seems that Nick Fury already knows what he killed Obadiah Stane, and he doesn't know what he will say. After connecting the phone, before Natasha Romanoff could speak, I heard Nick Fury ask on the other end of the phone, Natasha Romanoff, where are you now? Driving back to the newspaper office. What, Nick? Do you want to hold me accountable for what happened today? Hearing Natasha Romanoff use the word go back, Nick Fury always thought it was weird, but he didn't think much about it. Instead, he said directly, I know what happened today, but it's not a big deal, it's just Obadiah Stane. The reason why I called you is that there is one thing that needs your attention. Well, it's actually not that tricky, it's about EU, whom you value very much. About him. Natasha Romanoff's eyes narrowed when she heard Nick Fury's words. Thinking that EU used the super ability before, did something wrong and was investigated, Natasha Romanoff said in a slightly heavy voice. If it's not a big event, Nick, give me face and pretend it never happened. How about it? That's right, it's the wrong thing, not the bad thing. Natasha Romanoff thinks so. People, how can you not do a few things wrong? Where do you want to go? Listening to Natasha Romanoff's earnest voice, Nick Fury instantly understood, and even guessed that Natasha Romanoff was going to bury the evidence of what EU didn't do and deal with some non-existent witnesses. It was EU who abducted the newly recovered Captain America. You just need to pay attention. In order to prevent Natasha Romanoff from thinking wildly, Nick Fury immediately explained what happened. Walter. Listening to Nick Fury's narration, Natasha Romanoff was a little dazed for a moment, thinking that she had heard it wrong. After asking again and confirming that it was Steve Rogers, not someone else, Natasha Romanoff suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Isn't he dead, resurrected? And he was also abducted by his younger brother who habitually exudes warmth and warmth. For a short moment, Natasha Romanoff suddenly felt, it seems that in this world I can't understand it. Why can the dead be revived and abducted by EU? Say something. Are the agents of SHIELD free to eat? Such a legendary hero can't stand to be resurrected and actually let his own EU be abducted. Natasha Romanoff really wants to know, what kind of people did SHIELD's Eagle's Nest train? Why do you feel so unprofessional? And EU abducted a newly recovered superhero home in the morning. Thinking of this, Natasha Romanoff was speechless for a while. If you treat yourself as your own younger brother, then pamper yourself, otherwise what else can you do? Looking for flowers and evaluation votes. Well, what can I do? The protagonist abducts Captain America. Just as he parked his car and entered the newspaper office, Natasha Romanoff casually grabbed a female employee and asked, Is the boss here? Well, hearing Natasha Romanoff's inquiry, the female staff looked a little guilty. Miss Natasha Romanoff, the boss said that no one will disturb them. And what? Asked Natasha Romanoff, frowning. Alas, our boss and the person he brought back have nothing to do with him, but Tony Stark is a drunkard. Hearing what the female staff said, Natasha Romanoff froze for a moment. Why, Tony Stark is here too. Letting go of the female staff member, Natasha Romanoff walked directly into the elevator and then directly pressed the button on the top floor. The 15-story building of Bugle newspaper was all bought by EU. The first to fourth floors are the newspaper office, and the fifth and sixth floors are the publishing houses under EU. Or employees who have no conditions to rent a house are treated as dormitories. The 10th to 15th floors are never open to the public. EU and the others are currently on the 15th floor, which can be said to be in a large room of hundreds of square meters in the real sense. Enough for hundreds of people to have a party here. But at this moment, when Natasha Romanoff came to the top floor and opened the door of the room, she found that the room was not as noisy as expected. Instead, it was playing soothing pop music that was popular decades ago. And in the middle of the room, EU and Steve were sitting on the carpet and leaning against the sofa, drinking and looking at Tony Stark in front of them with a smile. At this moment, Tony Stark is holding a wine bottle in his left hand and a sofa cushion in his right hand. His whole body is constantly spinning, dancing an unknown dance. While dancing, he also shouted at Yu who videotaped him, saying that he would take all of them and post them on the internet. While dancing, he said loudly that his dance will definitely cause a wave in the dance world. He will eventually be regarded as a classic by the entire dance world. Seeing the drunken Tony Stark twisting his body and dancing uncoordinatedly, while Yu was videotaping, shouting hello with a smile, and turning his head to talk to Steve, Natasha Romanoff immediately sighed in one breath. How much wine did you drink? Why are you so drunk? While talking, Natasha Romanoff walked to Yu's side. Tony Stark danced wildly with alcohol, waving the sofa cushions in his hands indiscriminately. Natasha Romanoff can ignore it, but Yu absolutely can't drink so much alcohol. Seeing Natasha Romanoff approaching, Yu smiled and was about to say something, but saw Natasha Romanoff sitting directly beside him and took the wine glass in his hand. After taking a sip, he frowned and said, "This is such a strong wine. It must be at least 70 degrees. 85-degree spirits, the kind that haven't been mixed." Yu smiled and then said to Steve, "This is Natasha Romanoff, a very strong, powerful, very beautiful woman." I introduced Natasha Romanoff to Steve. I was about to introduce Steve to Natasha Romanoff, but I heard Tony Stark on the side throw the cushion in his hand on the ground and then sat down on the carpet all at once. Staring at Yu with bright red eyes, she said, "The more beautiful a woman is, the more difficult it is for people to guess. Tell me, who am I? I'm a famous genius, the famous Tony Stark. For a person like me, there are so many women out there who want to pursue me crazily, but I don't agree." But, hiccup. After hiccuping, Tony Stark raised his hand and slapped his body indiscriminately. "But you said Peppo is not bad. I am also not bad, so what do you say she is worried about?" I told her that I was going to hand over the Stark industry to her and let her take care of it for me, and then the two of us can still be together. "But she actually has a hesitation, she actually has a hesitation." While talking, Tony Stark supported his body, moved forward a few times, moved his whole body to the low table, picked up a glass, no matter who it was, and drank the wine in the glass directly. The highly alcoholic drink made Tony Stark frown hotly, and after a while he said angrily with red eyes, "I'm not afraid. What is she afraid of? It's like I'm a playboy, hiccup. Am I that kind of person?" Looking at the flushed Tony Stark, listening to him constantly say how dedicated he is to feelings, Natasha Romanoff on the side shook her head speechlessly. Yu, on the other hand, used his mobile phone to constantly videotape Tony Stark. While recording, he also encouraged Tony to speak more and speak out what was in his heart. Well, speaking of joy, these two guys actually gave each other high fives. Steve on the side was smirking, looking nostalgically at the scene in front of him, and at the same time researching whether peanuts are better with wine or melon seeds are better with wine. After studying for half a day, it really is a new century, and this is really a difficult multiple-choice question. As for Natasha Romanoff, she sighed and looked at the weird scene in front of her. She really wanted to know. After Tony Stark sobered up, he found himself dancing with a sofa cushion, twisting his body while drunk. And after the dance, he vomited bitter words about his single-minded feelings, especially when Yu was filmed. Would he commit suicide on the spot in shame and indignation in the evening on the roof? As the sun set in the west, bathed in the golden afterglow of the setting sun and blowing a gentle breeze, Yu felt that the whole person felt much lighter. Steve Rogers on the side also smiled, on his face full of stories. Looking at the afterglow of the beautiful sunset, the whole person is a little fascinated. "It's really beautiful, isn't it? I can't remember how long ago it was the last time I saw such a beautiful scenery at sunset." Taking a sip of the wine in the bottle, Steve turned his head, looked at Yu and said with a smile, "Thank you for inviting me to drink today, but you should know my identity." "It's not hard to guess, is it?" Hearing Steve's question, Yu didn't deny it but just nodded lightly. "The world is changing so fast, and what I like the most is watching the sunset gradually go down in the sky. It seems that this can make the irritating and fast pace of life gradually slow down. You are young, how can you have such an old man's thinking?" Steve stretched out his hand, put it on Yu's shoulder and patted it lightly. He didn't move his arm but just laughed softly. "At your age, shouldn't it be the time when the sun rises? Why do you always have so many things on your mind?" "Aren't you too?" Turning his head and looking at Steve, Yu said softly, "Not counting those years of being frozen, aren't you only 25 years old?" 25. Hearing what Yu said, Steve lowered his head slightly, repeated his age, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I don't even know how old I should be now, don't talk about this." Steve raised his head, looked at Yu and asked, "Just now, the person sent away by his bodyguard Happy is called Tony Stark, he should be Howard's son." Yes, it's Howard and Maria's child. You nodded. If I remember correctly, Howard seems to be your friend, so Tony should call you uncle. Shrugging his shoulders, Steve didn't answer, just raised his head, watching the golden light gradually weaken, and the sun gradually became less dazzling. Next, do you have any plans? Yu put his hands on the guardrail, watched the sky gradually darken, and couldn't help asking softly, I have no idea. Steve shook his head. I've been out of touch with this world for so long that when I open my eyes, everything in this world has changed. I don't know what else I can do. I used to think about becoming a painter, but then the war broke out and people went to the front. I wanted to, but at that time my body was too thin, and the whole body is full of diseases. They don't want me at all. Actually, watching my best friend Bucky go to the front line to fight while I stay behind is really uncomfortable. Fortunately, I met Dr. Erkins and he turned me into a Superman. For a few years, I've been around fighting Hydra with Howling Commandos. Perhaps during that time, it was the happiest time for me, with Bucky, my teammates from the Howling Commando.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.